Zinnia Belmont Reeve should have gone home with the rest of the guests. The annual donor dinner had ended hours earlier. The applause was gone. The music had stopped. The wealthy guests had left the Reeve Foundation building smiling, convinced they had witnessed another perfect night from America's most admired young couple. Calloway Reeve and Zinnia Belmont Reeve, a billionaire investor and his graceful heiress wife. To the public, they looked like love, legacy, and power standing side by side. But Zinnia returned alone. She had forgotten her blue satin clutch inside the private lounge. It rested near the chair where she had sat earlier, watching her husband speak with pride in her eyes. That night, Calloway had praised her in front of everyone. He had said his wife taught him that wealth meant nothing unless it protected people. Those words had touched Zinnia deeply. She thought he meant them. She walked through the quiet hallway, still wearing the deep blue gown he once said made her look calm and strong. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor. She was tired, but her heart felt full. She thought she was returning for a small, forgotten item. She did not know she was walking toward the sentence that would break her marriage open. Before we continue, welcome to Love Tales with Mr. Easton. If you are new here, subscribe and join the family. Zinnia reached the private lounge and placed her hand on the door handle. Before she pushed it open, she heard a woman laugh inside. It was soft, close, too familiar. Zinnia stopped. The door was not fully closed. A slim opening let the voices slip into the hallway. At first, she thought a staff member had stayed behind to clear the room, but the next voice made her fingers tighten around the handle. It was Calloway, her husband. His tone was low and private, the way he spoke when he believed no one else was listening. Zinnia should have stepped away. She knew that. But the woman's voice held her in place. Verity Cross. Zinnia knew her from charity events and wealthy social rooms. Verity always smiled too smoothly, spoke too sweetly, and looked at Zinnia as though kindness offended her. "You looked happy tonight," Verity said. Calloway released a short breath. "I gave a speech. That is different." Zinnia's chest tightened. Verity's voice dropped lower. "Do you love her?" The question froze Zinnia where she stood. For 3 years, that same fear had lived quietly inside her. She had wondered during late nights. She had wondered when Calloway turned his phone face down. She had wondered when his hands felt warm in public, but distant at home. Now, another woman had asked the question Zinnia had feared most, and Calloway was about to answer. Calloway did not pause long enough. That was what hurt first. There was no heavy silence, no sign of inner battle, no breath that sounded like guilt, only his voice, clear, cold, final. "No," he said. "I married her for her father's money."
I married her for her father's money.
Zinnia's hand slipped from the handle. For a moment, her mind refused to accept the words. They were simple. They were direct. Still, her heart rejected them. "No, I married her. For her father's money. Not because he loved her. Not because she brought him peace. Not because she had stood beside him through pressure, silence, and long nights when the world expected him to be perfect. Money. Her father's money, her family's name, her trust, her marriage, all reduced to a deal inside a private lounge. Verity went quiet for a moment. Zinnia could almost feel the pleasure in that silence. "So all that praise tonight," Verity asked, "was that for the donors too?" Calloway did not answer right away. Zinnia wanted that pause to mean shame. She wanted it to mean he regretted what he had said. But hope is painful when truth has already spoken. Calloway said, "People hear what they need to hear at events like this." Zinnia pressed one hand to her chest. Hours ago, she had believed her husband finally understood her heart. Now she knew he had only understood the room. Zinnia stood outside the door as memories rushed through her. The heart does not break in one clean moment. It brings back every tender scene and forces you to question it. She remembered the night her father had suffered a health scare. Orson Belmont had been resting in a private hospital room while Zinnia stood in the hallway trying not to cry. Calloway had found her there. He had taken her hand without saying much. He had stayed beside her until her breathing slowed. That night, she thought love had found her quietly. Now she wondered if he had comforted her, because Orson's trust mattered. She remembered the morning before a board meeting when Calloway kissed her forehead and said, "You make me calmer." She had carried those words like a gift. Now they felt like a bill she never knew she was paying. She remembered the rainy evening in their kitchen. No music, no audience. Only Calloway pulling her close while rain touched the windows. She had laughed against his chest. He had held her like a man who felt safe. That memory had lived in her like proof. Now it felt stolen. Every soft look, every gentle touch, every late-night confession, every promise. Zinnia had saved those moments like pieces of a home. One sentence had walked through that home and taken the roof off. Inside the lounge, Verity spoke again. "And now that Orson Belmont is close to signing over the expansion shares?" Zinnia's eyes opened fully. The expansion shares. Her father had been reviewing them for months. The agreement would deepen the partnership between Belmont Global and Reeve Capital. Calloway had discussed it with care at dinners. He had shown respect in board meetings. He had thanked Orson with the calm voice of a man who valued trust. Zinnia had believed the deal mattered because it would help both families build something meaningful. Now she understood the real reason. Calloway had been waiting for it. He stood inside that lounge with another woman and held the truth like it belonged to him alone. "Then I get what I came for," he said. No softness, no regret, no thought for the wife standing outside the door with her heart falling apart. Zinnia's throat tightened. This was not one careless sentence. It had a history. It had planning. It had patience. Calloway had entered her life with thoughtful questions, warm attention, and quiet charm. He had learned her fears. He had earned her father's trust. He had stood under white roses and promised her a future, all while needing Belmont money more than he needed her heart. In that moment, Zinnia felt poor in a way wealth could never fix, because no fortune could buy back trust once it was spent. Zinnia stepped back. She needed air. She needed distance. She needed to leave before the pain in her chest became a sound, but her heel brushed the marble floor. The sound was small, but it reached the lounge. Calloway stopped speaking. The silence changed at once. Zinnia knew he had heard it before he even turned. Slowly, the door opened wider. Calloway stood near the balcony with a glass in his hand. Verity stood too close beside him, wearing the calm face of a woman who had been caught but not humbled. For one terrible second, no one spoke. Calloway looked at Zinnia. Zinnia looked at Calloway. His face shifted from surprise to fear. Not fear of gossip, not fear of losing a deal, fear of losing the woman he had lied to for too long. Zinnia's eyes moved from his face to Verity's hand near his arm, then back to him. Calloway placed his glass down. "Zinnia," he said. Her name sounded different now, borrowed, undeserved. She stepped into the doorway. Her heart was breaking, but her face stayed calm. That calm frightened him more than tears. Tears would give him a way to comfort her. Anger would give him something to fight. But her silence gave him nothing to use. Only truth. If you were Zinnia, would you confront him right there or walk away and let silence punish him first? Comment your answer. Like, share, and subscribe to Love Tales with Mr. Easton. Before that painful night in the private lounge, most people saw Calloway Reeve and Zinnia Belmont Reeve as the kind of couple every wealthy room wanted to admire. They entered events together with calm confidence. Calloway walked with one hand resting near Zinnia's back, guiding her through crowds as though protecting something precious. Zinnia smiled with grace, never loud, never desperate for attention, but always noticed. To the outside world, they looked balanced. He carried power. She carried warmth. He spoke like a man who owned the room. She listened like a woman who understood more than she said. People loved watching them together, because their marriage seemed to offer everything society respected: money, beauty, discipline, family legacy, public kindness, influence, and above all, the appearance of love. At charity dinners, guests whispered about them with admiration. Some said Zinnia softened Calloway. Some said Calloway gave Zinnia the confidence to step beyond her father's shadow. Some said their marriage was proof that business families could still build something personal, tender, and lasting. Zinnia heard those comments often. At first, she found them uncomfortable. She never liked being treated like part of a perfect display. She wanted a real marriage, not a polished image for cameras and donors. But over time, even she began to believe the praise carried some truth. After all, Calloway did stand beside her. He did defend her ideas in public. He did look at her across crowded rooms with eyes that seemed to say she mattered. When reporters asked about their marriage, Calloway gave careful answers. "My wife reminds me why legacy should serve people," he once said. Zinnia had kept that line in her heart. She did not know how much of Calloway's public tenderness was chosen for effect. She did not know that some men learn the language of love without surrendering to its responsibility. So while America admired them, Zinnia trusted them. She believed their marriage was not perfect, but growing. She believed love did not need to be loud to be real. And that belief made what waited ahead hurt even more. Calloway Reeve had spent years building the image of a man who never lost control. In business magazines, he was praised as a disciplined billionaire investor with sharp instincts and a clean public record. Analysts loved his silence almost as much as his success. He did not waste words. He did not beg for approval. He spoke slowly, made firm decisions, and left people believing every move had been planned with care. Young executives studied him. Older investors respected him. Rivals watched him with quiet caution. Calloway knew how to enter a boardroom and make others sit straighter without raising his voice. He wore power with ease, not through loud displays, but through restraint. His suits were tailored, his eyes were steady, his answers were measured. Even his pauses felt expensive. That control made people trust him. It also made people fear disappointing him. When Calloway spoke about growth, people listened. When he spoke about expansion, investors leaned in. When he spoke about legacy, donors nodded as if they had been waiting for someone to say the right thing in the right voice. But Calloway's greatest skill was not money. It was reading people. He knew when to flatter a proud man. He knew when to stay silent around a cautious one. He knew when to soften his face beside Zinnia, when to touch her hand in public, when to praise her in front of her father, and when to make the world believe he was a husband shaped by devotion. The public called it charm. Calloway called it survival. He had learned early that every room had rules. Every powerful person had a weakness. Every conversation had a price. His mother, Iona Reeve, had taught him that life rewarded those who learned to use both truth and silence. So Calloway built himself into a man people admired, a man people trusted with fortunes, a man Orson Belmont slowly allowed near his family empire. Yet beneath Calloway's control lived a pressure he rarely showed. Reeve Capital needed the Belmont partnership more than anyone knew. And the man praised for calm judgment had already made one choice that placed his marriage on dangerous ground. He had allowed ambition to stand too close to love. Zinnia Belmont Reeve had never needed to demand attention. People noticed her before she spoke. She carried the Belmont name, and that name opened doors long before she reached them. Her father, Orson Belmont, had built Belmont Global into one of the most respected family-owned companies in America. Because of him, Zinnia grew up surrounded by wealth, manners, expectations, and watchful eyes. Many people assumed they understood her. They saw the elegant gowns, they saw the charity boards, they saw the mansion in Connecticut and the penthouse in Manhattan. They saw a woman born into comfort and decided her life must have been easy. But Zinnia knew wealth did not protect a person from loneliness. It often made loneliness harder to explain. She had spent years walking into rooms where people smiled at her while trying to calculate her value. Some wanted access to her father. Some wanted her friendship because of her surname. Some wanted to stand near her because power looks better when borrowed from someone else. Zinnia learned to be polite without being foolish. She learned to smile without giving too much away. She learned that not everyone who praised her kindness respected her boundaries. Still, she chose softness. That was what made her rare. Zinnia loved children's charities, quiet libraries, handwritten notes, and mornings without cameras. She cared about people in a way that never felt rehearsed. When she spoke to staff members at events, she remembered names. When foundation workers mentioned sick parents or children graduating school, Zinnia asked about them later. Some called her delicate. They were wrong. Zinnia's strength did not announce itself. It lived in how she stayed kind without becoming blind. It lived in how she honored her father without losing her own voice. It lived in how she loved Calloway, not because she needed his money, but because she believed she had finally found someone who saw the woman beneath the Belmont name. That was the painful beauty of her trust. She did not love Calloway as a strategy. She loved him as a choice, and to Zinnia, a choice made from the heart deserved honesty in return. By their second year of marriage, Calloway and Zinnia had become more than a couple. They became a symbol. Business magazines placed them on glossy covers beside words like legacy, influence, and purpose. Wealth reporters described their marriage as a bridge between old family power and modern investment genius. Charity boards praised them as proof that money could still serve communities when guided by the right hands. Every public appearance strengthened that image. When they arrived at fundraisers, cameras turned. When they entered board dinners, conversations shifted. When they supported a housing project or children's education campaign, donors opened checkbooks faster because the Reeve and Belmont names together made generosity feel safe. Guests loved the way Zinnia looked at Calloway when he spoke. They loved the way Calloway seemed to pause before mentioning his wife, as if her name deserved care. They loved the quiet hand touches, the shared smiles, the way he pulled out her chair, the way she adjusted his cuff before speeches. Small things become large in public when people want to believe in a love story. Orson Belmont watched it all with mixed feelings. He admired parts of Calloway, the discipline, the intelligence, the hunger to build, but he also knew ambition could wear good manners. He had seen men use charm like a key. He had seen women hurt by promises spoken too smoothly. Still, he saw Zinnia happy. That softened him. A father may question a man's motives, but when his daughter's face lights up around that man, suspicion becomes harder to hold in the open. Zinnia noticed her father relaxing around Calloway. She saw them speaking longer after meetings. She saw Orson asking for Calloway's opinion. She saw the trust forming, and it made her proud. To her, the praise surrounding the marriage did not feel empty. It felt earned. They were building something together, a life, a partnership, a future. Every headline seemed to confirm what she wanted to believe. Every compliment made her hope stronger. Every smiling guest became another witness to the marriage she thought was real. No one in those rooms knew the truth had another face. No one knew that public praise was helping hide a private motive. Zinnia did not fall for Calloway because of his wealth. She had grown up around money her entire life. Expensive cars did not impress her. Private clubs did not move her. Luxury homes did not make her feel safe. What touched her were the quiet moments no one else saw. The first time Calloway brought soup to her office because she had skipped dinner, Zinnia stared at the container longer than she should have. It was not the soup. It was the thought. The fact that he had noticed her tired eyes during a foundation meeting and said nothing in public, only to send care later without making a show of it. That mattered to her. Another night, after Orson's health scare, Calloway stayed with her in the hospital hallway. He did not make a speech. He did not give false comfort. He sat beside her, took her hand, and let silence do what words could not. Zinnia remembered thinking, "He understands me." After their marriage, those moments grew. Calloway would find her in the library with a book open in her lap and a cup of tea going cold beside her. He would sit near her without interrupting. Sometimes he would read his reports while she read beside him, and the peace between them felt like love. On rainy evenings, he sometimes came home carrying the weight of investor calls and board pressure. Zinnia learned his moods. She knew when his jaw tightened, when his shoulders looked too stiff, when his voice had gone too calm. She would ask him one gentle question. "Where does it hurt today?" At first, Calloway resisted. Later, he answered. He told her things he had never said in interviews. He spoke about Iona, pressure, fear, and the lonely cost of being raised to win at everything. Zinnia did not judge him. She held his truth with care. Those were the moments that convinced her their marriage had changed. Even if it had started with arrangement, attention, and family expectation, she believed it had grown into something honest. She believed tenderness proved love. She did not yet understand that tenderness without truth still leaves a wound. While Zinnia built faith in the marriage, Calloway kept one truth locked away. He had entered her life with a need he never confessed. Reeve Capital had looked strong from the outside. The offices were sleek. The numbers looked impressive in press interviews. Investors praised Calloway's confidence. His name carried weight in rooms where weakness was never forgiven. But inside the company, pressure had been growing. A failed international expansion had placed his future at risk. Some lenders had become cautious. Certain investors had started asking harder questions. Rivals sensed weakness and waited for him to stumble. Calloway needed more than success. He needed rescue dressed as partnership. Before Zinnia Belmont became Calloway Reeves' wife, she was known everywhere as Orson Belmont's daughter. That name followed her before she entered any room. Orson Belmont was not a man people ignored. He had built Belmont Global from a respected family business into one of the most trusted companies in America. His name carried weight in boardrooms, charity circles, political dinners, private clubs, and every wealthy space where people measured value before they measured character. To the public, Orson represented discipline, wealth, and legacy. To Zinnia, he was simply her father. She knew the man behind the title. She knew how he took his coffee in the morning. She knew the way his voice changed when he spoke about her late mother. She knew he worked too hard, slept too little, and carried the Belmont name like a duty rather than a crown. Orson loved Zinnia deeply, but his world was never simple. His money opened doors, but it also filled those doors with people who wanted something. Every invitation came with a reason. Every smile held a question. Every family friend seemed to have a son to introduce, a project to pitch, or a favor to place gently in Orson's path. Zinnia grew up learning that her father's love protected her, but his power exposed her. At school, classmates whispered about her family's homes. At charity events, adults praised her manners before asking about her father. At business dinners, people spoke to her sweetly while watching Orson from the corner of their eyes. She learned early that being loved by a powerful man did not mean she was free from pressure. It meant more people studied her, hoping to reach him through her. Orson tried to shield her from that world. He placed trusted drivers near her. He made sure staff treated her with care. He asked quiet questions about anyone who tried to get too close. But even his protection had limits. A father can guard the gate, but he cannot silence every whisper outside it. Zinnia grew up surrounded by comfort, yet she often felt alone in rooms full of admiration. Everyone knew her name. Few people knew her. People looked at Zinnia's life and thought she had no right to feel pain. They saw the mansion in Connecticut, the penthouse in Manhattan, the private schools, the charity invitations, the polished cars waiting outside glass buildings, and they assumed comfort had erased every struggle. To them, wealth meant ease. To Zinnia, wealth often meant being watched. She could not step into a room without feeling eyes follow her. Some eyes held admiration, some held envy, some held hunger. She learned to tell the difference by the way people smiled. A real smile warmed the face. A useful smile searched for a weakness. Zinnia met many useful smiles. People judged what she wore, how she spoke, how often she laughed, how much she donated, whether she seemed humble enough, whether she seemed confident enough, whether she looked grateful for a life they thought should satisfy her forever. If she stayed quiet, people called her shy. If she spoke with strength, they called her spoiled. If she attended an event, they said she loved attention. If she skipped one, they said she thought she was better than everyone else. Zinnia learned that some people never wanted to know the truth about her. They only wanted a version of her that matched what they had already decided. Even kindness became something people questioned. When she gave to children's programs, some said it was good public image. When she remembered staff names, some said rich women liked to feel noble. When she listened more than she spoke, some said she had no mind for leadership. Those judgments hurt, but being used hurt more. Friends appeared during donation season. Old classmates reached out when they needed introductions. Men spoke to her with romance in their voices, but business in their eyes. Some wanted a dinner with Orson, some wanted a place near Belmont Global, some wanted the status of being close to a woman whose last name opened doors. Zinnia learned to protect herself quietly. She did not become bitter. She became careful. That was the part people missed. A life filled with comfort still felt small when every relationship came with a question mark. Comfort placed silk around her shoulders. It did not always give her room to breathe. Zinnia heard the words people used when they thought she was not listening. She would make someone very lucky. Marrying into Belmont would change a man's life. Orson's daughter is the real door into that family. They said those things with laughter, as if Zinnia were not a person with private thoughts, private fears, and a heart that still hoped for honest love. In wealthy spaces, people rarely spoke plainly. They wrapped ambition in compliments. They called interest admiration. They called access connection. They called strategy romance if the room looked expensive enough. Zinnia learned that some men did not look at her. They looked through her. They saw the Belmont estate. They saw board seats. They saw invitations. They saw Orson's approval waiting like a prize at the end of a well-performed courtship. They asked about her favorite flowers, but their eyes sharpened when her father's company came up. They praised her kindness, but their questions circled back to Belmont Global. They told her she was rare, but they treated her life like a ladder. Zinnia noticed. She noticed more than people expected, because her gentleness made others careless. They mistook her calm voice for lack of awareness. They mistook her patience for need. They mistook her polite smile for permission to keep taking. Women judged her too. Some envied her place in rooms they had fought to enter. Some spoke warmly while measuring her worth. Some assumed she had never earned anything because her father had given her a name that made life easier. Zinnia understood why people thought that. She knew privilege had touched her life. She never denied it. But privilege did not erase pain. It did not replace trust. It did not give her one true friend at midnight when the world felt too loud. It did not teach her whom to believe. The hardest part was not that people wanted things from her. The hardest part was knowing they would pretend it was love. So Zinnia learned to move carefully through admiration. She accepted compliments without handing over trust. She watched people's eyes when money entered a conversation. She listened to what they praised first. Her beauty brought attention. Her name brought interest. But her heart stayed guarded. Not closed, guarded. There is a difference. Away from cameras and formal dinners, Zinnia's life was much quieter than people expected. She loved mornings before the house became busy. She liked sitting near tall windows with tea in her hands, watching sunlight reach the floor in slow lines. Those moments felt honest to her because no one needed anything from her. No one measured her. No one asked for Orson. No one praised the Belmont name. There was only peace. Books became another kind of shelter. Zinnia read novels, biographies, letters, and old poems her mother had once marked with notes in the margins. She loved stories about people who chose courage in private before the world ever saw it. She loved characters who stayed kind without surrendering their self-respect. Those stories helped her understand herself. They reminded her that quiet people still carry fire. But children's charities held the deepest place in her heart. Zinnia had started visiting youth programs when she was young, first beside her mother, later alone. She remembered the first time a little girl handed her a crayon drawing and said, "This is the house I want when I grow up." The drawing had a yellow door, a tree, and 3 stick figures holding hands. Zinnia kept it in a folder for years. That drawing taught her something no business lecture ever had. People did not need luxury to feel safe. They needed care, shelter, dignity, and someone willing to fight for them without asking for applause. That belief shaped her charity work. She read every proposal, she visited program sites, she spoke to teachers, nurses, housing workers, and mothers who carried too much with too little support. She did not want her name stamped on projects she did not understand. She wanted to know who the work served. That was why dishonest people exhausted her. Zinnia did not expect perfection from anyone. She understood fear. She understood mistakes. She understood silence when pain became too heavy. But she valued honesty, even painful honesty, especially painful honesty. Because a hard truth gave a person something solid to stand on. A lie, even a gentle one, left her reaching for ground that was never there. Zinnia's gentleness made people underestimate her. They saw the calm voice, the soft smile, the careful way she chose her words, and they assumed she would bend forever. But Zinnia had never been weak. She had survived a world where every kindness was tested. She had grown up among people who dressed ambition in good manners. She had watched her father build an empire and learned that strength did not always need to raise its voice. Orson taught her many things without giving formal lessons. He taught her that anger used too quickly often served the person who caused it. He taught her to listen until people revealed themselves. He taught her that silence, when used with purpose, could pressure a dishonest person more than shouting. Zinnia took those lessons into her own life. When donors dismissed community concerns, she asked questions until their plans exposed their weakness. When executives spoke over her in meetings, she let them finish, then returned to the exact point they hoped everyone had forgotten. When society women treated staff poorly, Zinnia remembered it and never invited them into projects where kindness mattered. She did not punish people loudly. She simply adjusted access. That was her strength. Quiet boundaries, clear memory, steady values. Still, she had a tender heart. She wanted to believe people could grow. She gave second chances when she saw effort. She forgave mistakes when truth came with them. Her danger was not weakness. Her danger was hope. Hope made her stay patient longer than others would. Hope made her search for goodness in people who had only shown pieces of it. Hope made her believe love could soften a man raised by pressure. That hope would one day lead her toward Calloway. But even before him, Zinnia knew one thing with deep certainty. She did not want to become hard just because the world was careless. She wanted to stay open without becoming easy to break. That balance shaped her. Gentle hands, strong spine, kind heart, clear limits. Anyone who mistook one for the absence of the other never truly knew her. Deep down, Zinnia wanted one simple thing. She wanted to be chosen for herself, not for Orson, not for Belmont Global, not for the houses, the shares, the charity boards, or the invitations that came with her last name. She wanted a man who heard her speak about children's housing and cared about the children, not the donors. She wanted someone who asked what book had kept her awake at night, not what deal her father planned to approve next quarter. She wanted a man who noticed when her smile became tired, a man who stayed when the room no longer offered him anything, a man who understood that her softness was not decoration. It was discipline. It was a choice she made every day despite everything she had seen. Zinnia did not need a man to rescue her. She had money, she had family, she had education, she had access to every kind of comfort people thought mattered. What she lacked was the safety of being known without being used. That was why Calloway's attention touched her so deeply when he first entered her life. He did what other men failed to do. He asked about her work before asking about her father's company. He listened when she spoke. He noticed the loneliness she had never explained. He made her feel, for a little while, that someone had finally seen past the Belmont name and reached the woman standing beneath it. That feeling became dangerous because it met the oldest ache inside her. The ache to be loved without calculation, the ache to be held without being measured, the ache to give her heart without wondering what the other person hoped to gain from it. Zinnia believed comfort did not always mean freedom, because she had lived that truth for years. She had known rooms full of beauty that felt like cages. She had known luxury that left her lonely. She had known praise that did not feel like love. So when Calloway came with quiet attention and careful words, she wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe this time someone saw her heart first. That hope would become her greatest gift. It would also become the place Calloway wounded most. Belmont Global offered everything he needed: capital, land, reputation, public trust. Orson Belmont had built his company over decades, and one agreement with Belmont Global would quiet doubts around Reeve Capital. That was where Zinnia became dangerous to her own heart. She was not part of the company's finances in the way Orson was, but she was part of his soul. Orson loved his daughter more than any deal. Calloway understood that. Iona understood it too. In their world, love was rarely viewed as sacred. It was treated as leverage by people who had forgotten the cost of hurting others. Calloway told himself he would never be cruel to Zinnia. He told himself he would treat her well. He told himself marriage could serve both purpose and kindness. But a hidden motive does not stay harmless because a person wraps it in good manners. Every affectionate gesture carried a secret weight. Every family dinner pushed him closer to what he wanted. Every time Orson trusted him more, Calloway moved one step deeper into the lie. The tragedy was not that Calloway felt nothing for Zinnia. The tragedy was that he began to feel something and still chose silence. He let Zinnia believe love had grown clean between them, while business sat at the center of their marriage like a debt waiting to be collected. And the truth he refused to face was simple. A relationship built on hidden motives does not break when the truth arrives. It was already broken. The truth only gives the wound a name. Before Zinnia Belmont became Calloway Reeves' wife, she was known everywhere as Orson Belmont's daughter. That name followed her before she entered any room. Orson Belmont was not a man people ignored. He had built Belmont Global from a respected family business into one of the most trusted companies in America. His name carried weight in boardrooms, charity circles, political dinners, private clubs, and every wealthy space where people measured value before they measured character. To the public, Orson represented discipline, wealth, and legacy. To Zinnia, he was simply her father. She knew the man behind the title. She knew how he took his coffee in the morning. She knew the way his voice changed when he spoke about her late mother. She knew he worked too hard, slept too little, and carried the Belmont name like a duty rather than a crown. Orson loved Zinnia deeply, but his world was never simple. His money opened doors, but it also filled those doors with people who wanted something. Every invitation came with a reason. Every smile held a question. Every family friend seemed to have a son to introduce, a project to pitch, or a favor to place gently in Orson's path. Zinnia grew up learning that her father's love protected her, but his power exposed her. At school, classmates whispered about her family's homes. At charity events, adults praised her manners before asking about her father. At business dinners, people spoke to her sweetly while watching Orson from the corner of their eyes. She learned early that being loved by a powerful man did not mean she was free from pressure. It meant more people studied her, hoping to reach him through her. Orson tried to shield her from that world. He placed trusted drivers near her. He made sure staff treated her with care. He asked quiet questions about anyone who tried to get too close. But even his protection had limits. A father can guard the gate, but he cannot silence every whisper outside it. Zinnia grew up surrounded by comfort, yet she often felt alone in rooms full of admiration. Everyone knew her name. Few people knew her. People looked at Zinnia's life and thought she had no right to feel pain. They saw the mansion in Connecticut, the penthouse in Manhattan, the private schools, the charity invitations, the polished cars waiting outside glass buildings, and they assumed comfort had erased every struggle. To them, wealth meant ease. To Zinnia, wealth often meant being watched. She could not step into a room without feeling eyes follow her. Some eyes held admiration, some held envy. Some held hunger. She learned to tell the difference by the way people smiled. A real smile warmed the face. A useful smile searched for a weakness. Zinnia met many useful smiles. People judged what she wore, how she spoke, how often she laughed, how much she donated, whether she seemed humble enough, whether she seemed confident enough, whether she looked grateful for a life they thought should satisfy her forever. If she stayed quiet, people called her shy. If she spoke with strength, they called her spoiled. If she attended an event, they said she loved attention. If she skipped one, they said she thought she was better than everyone else. Zinnia learned that some people never wanted to know the truth about her. They only wanted a version of her that matched what they had already decided. Even kindness became something people questioned. When she gave to children's programs, some said it was good public image. When she remembered staff names, some said rich women like to feel noble. When she listened more than she spoke, some said she had no mind for leadership. Those judgments hurt, but being used hurt more. Friends appeared during donation season. Old classmates reached out when they needed introductions. Men spoke to her with romance in their voices, but business in their eyes. Some wanted a dinner with Orson. Some wanted a place near Belmont Global. Some wanted the status of being close to a woman whose last name opened doors. Zinnia learned to protect herself quietly. She did not become bitter. She became careful. That was the part people missed. A life filled with comfort still felt small when every relationship came with a question mark. Comfort placed silk around her shoulders. It did not always give her room to breathe. Zinnia heard the words people used when they thought she was not listening. She would make someone very lucky. Marrying into Belmont would change a man's life. Orson's daughter is the real door into that family. They said those things with laughter, as if Zinnia were not a person with private thoughts, private fears, and a heart that still hoped for honest love. In wealthy spaces, people rarely spoke plainly. They wrapped ambition in compliments. They called interest admiration. They called access connection. They called strategy romance if the room looked expensive enough. Zinnia learned that some men did not look at her. They looked through her. They saw the Belmont estate. They saw board seats. They saw invitations. They saw Orson's approval waiting like a prize at the end of a well-performed courtship. They asked about her favorite flowers, but their eyes sharpened when her father's company came up. They praised her kindness, but their questions circled back to Belmont Global. They told her she was rare, but they treated her life like a ladder. Zinnia noticed. She noticed more than people expected. Because her gentleness made others careless. They mistook her calm voice for lack of awareness. They mistook her patience for need. They mistook her polite smile for permission to keep taking. Women judged her too. Some envied her place in rooms they had fought to enter. Some spoke warmly while measuring her worth. Some assumed she had never earned anything because her father had given her a name that made life easier. Zinnia understood why people thought that. She knew privilege had touched her life. She never denied it. But privilege did not erase pain. It did not replace trust. It did not give her one true friend at midnight when the world felt too loud. It did not teach her whom to believe. The hardest part was not that people wanted things from her. The hardest part was knowing they would pretend it was love. So Zinnia learned to move carefully through admiration. She accepted compliments without handing over trust. She watched people's eyes when money entered a conversation. She listened to what they praised first. Her beauty brought attention. Her name brought interest. But her heart stayed guarded. Not closed. Guarded. There is a difference. Away from cameras and formal dinners, Zinnia's life was much quieter than people expected. She loved mornings before the house became busy. She liked sitting near tall windows with tea in her hands, watching sunlight reach the floor in slow lines. Those moments felt honest to her, because no one needed anything from her. No one measured her. No one asked for Orson. No one praised the Belmont name. There was only peace. Books became another kind of shelter. Zinnia read novels, biographies, letters, and old poems her mother had once marked with notes in the margins. She loved stories about people who chose courage in private before the world ever saw it. She loved characters who stayed kind without surrendering their self-respect. Those stories helped her understand herself. They reminded her that quiet people still carry fire, but children's charities held the deepest place in her heart. Zinnia had started visiting youth programs when she was young, first beside her mother, later alone. She remembered the first time a little girl handed her a crayon drawing and said, "This is the house I want when I grow up." The drawing had a yellow door, a tree, and 3 stick figures holding hands. Zinnia kept it in a folder for years. That drawing taught her something no business lecture ever had. People did not need luxury to feel safe. They needed care, shelter, dignity, and someone willing to fight for them without asking for applause. That belief shaped her charity work. She read every proposal. She visited program sites. She spoke to teachers, nurses, housing workers, and mothers who carried too much with too little support. She did not want her name stamped on projects she did not understand. She wanted to know who the work served. That was why dishonest people exhausted her. Zinnia did not expect perfection from anyone. She understood fear. She understood mistakes. She understood silence when pain became too heavy. But she valued honesty. even painful honesty. Especially painful honesty, because a hard truth gave a person something solid to stand on. A lie, even a gentle one, left her reaching for ground that was never there. Zinnia's gentleness made people underestimate her. They saw the calm voice, the soft smile, the careful way she chose her words, and they assumed she would bend forever. But Zinnia had never been weak. She had survived a world where every kindness was tested. She had grown up among people who dressed ambition in good manners. She had watched her father build an empire and learned that strength did not always need to raise its voice. Orson taught her many things without giving formal lessons. He taught her that anger used too quickly often served the person who caused it. He taught her to listen until people revealed themselves. He taught her that silence, when used with purpose, could pressure a dishonest person more than shouting. Zinnia took those lessons into her own life. When donors dismissed community concerns, she asked questions until their plans exposed their weakness. When executives spoke over her in meetings, she let them finish, then returned to the exact point they hoped everyone had forgotten. When society women treated staff poorly, Zinnia remembered it and never invited them into projects where kindness mattered. She did not punish people loudly. She simply adjusted access. That was her strength. Quiet, boundaries, clear memory, steady values. Still, she had a tender heart. She wanted to believe people could grow. She gave second chances when she saw effort. She forgave mistakes when truth came with them. Her danger was not weakness. Her danger was hope. Hope made her stay patient longer than others would. Hope made her search for goodness in people who had only shown pieces of it. Hope made her believe love could soften a man raised by pressure. That hope would one day lead her toward Calloway. But even before him, Zinnia knew one thing with deep certainty. She did not want to become hard just because the world was careless. She wanted to stay open without becoming easy to break. That balance shaped her. Gentle hands, strong spine, kind heart, clear limits. Anyone who mistook one for the absence of the other never truly knew her. Deep down, Zinnia wanted one simple thing. She wanted to be chosen for herself, not for Orson, not for Belmont Global, not for the houses, the shares, the charity boards, or the invitations that came with her last name. She wanted a man who heard her speak about children's housing and cared about the children, not the donors. She wanted someone who asked what book had kept her awake at night, not what deal her father planned to approve next quarter. She wanted a man who noticed when her smile became tired, a man who stayed when the room no longer offered him anything, a man who understood that her softness was not decoration. It was discipline. It was a choice she made every day despite everything she had seen. Zinnia did not need a man to rescue her. She had money, she had family, she had education, she had access to every kind of comfort people thought mattered. What she lacked was the safety of being known without being used. That was why Calloway's attention touched her so deeply when he first entered her life. He did what other men failed to do. He asked about her work before asking about her father's company. He listened when she spoke. He noticed the loneliness she had never explained. He made her feel, for a little while, that someone had finally seen past the Belmont name and reached the woman standing beneath it. That feeling became dangerous because it met the oldest ache inside her. The ache to be loved without calculation. The ache to be held without being measured. The ache to give her heart without wondering what the other person hoped to gain from it. Zinnia believed comfort did not always mean freedom because she had lived that truth for years. She had known rooms full of beauty that felt like cages. She had known luxury that left her lonely. She had known praise that did not feel like love. So when Calloway came with quiet attention and careful words, she wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe this time someone saw her heart first. That hope would become her greatest gift. It would also become the place Calloway wounded most. Before Zinnia ever heard the truth in that lounge, Calloway Reeve had already built the image of a man who never needed help. To the public, he was the young billionaire investor every magazine wanted to profile. He spoke with confidence. He moved with control. He entered boardrooms as if uncertainty belonged to other men. His suits were perfect. His answers were clean. His smile arrived at the right moment and left before anyone felt too familiar with him. People called him disciplined. They called him brilliant. They called him the future of American private investment. Callaway accepted every title with a calm face, but none of those titles told the full story. Reeve Capital looked strong from the outside, but inside the company, pressure had started to spread through the walls. Senior partners were asking questions they used to avoid. Investors who once trusted Callaway without hesitation now wanted deeper reports. Lenders who once returned his calls within minutes now sent polite delays through assistants. Callaway noticed everything. He noticed when one investor stopped inviting him to private dinners. He noticed when a banker asked for extra security on a loan that had once been routine. He noticed when rivals began speaking about his firm with smiles that carried hidden pleasure. No one had to say he was slipping. In his world, silence often spoke louder than insult. Callaway had been raised to believe weakness was expensive. His mother had taught him that. Powerful people did not fall because they failed once. They fell because others saw fear in their faces. So Callaway worked harder to look untouched. At charity events, he stood beside Zinnia with easy grace. At business dinners, he spoke about growth with the confidence people expected. At interviews, he turned difficult questions into polished answers. But after the guests left and the cameras stopped flashing, he returned to his office and stared at numbers that refused to obey him. The firm needed new stability. The firm needed trust. The firm needed a partnership strong enough to quiet every whisper. Callaway knew where that strength lived, Belmont Global, and that knowledge began shaping every choice he made next. The threat to Reeve Capital did not begin with one public scandal. It began with a decision Callaway had believed would make him untouchable. An international expansion deal had promised fast growth, new properties, and a stronger global position. Callaway had sold the idea with the same quiet force he used in every room. He told investors the risk was controlled. He told partners the timing was right. He told himself that bold men won because they moved before others found courage. For a while, the deal looked like another victory. Reports came in strong. Meetings ended with handshakes. Financial writers praised Callaway for seeing opportunity where others saw delay. But beneath the polished reports, the deal began losing shape. Permits stalled, local partners missed deadlines, construction costs rose, a currency shift hurt projected returns. One silent problem became two. Two became five. Soon, Callaway's team spent more time explaining setbacks than building progress. The public still saw a rising empire. Callaway saw the truth. Money was locked in places where it was not producing results. Investors were growing tense. One wrong leak would damage the perfect image he had spent years building. Worse, the failed deal had created a chain of obligations that Reeve Capital had to carry with strength it no longer had. At first, Callaway refused to panic. He demanded new forecasts. He called emergency meetings. He pushed his team to renegotiate terms, cut losses, and protect the firm's reputation before anyone outside the inner circle saw how serious the trouble had become. But numbers do not respond to pride. No matter how many hours he spent in his glass office, no matter how many reports he marked with red notes, the truth remained. Reeve Capital needed a rescue plan, not a small one. Not a quiet loan from a nervous bank. It needed a partner with enough influence to restore faith before fear spread through the market. Callaway hated needing anyone. Need made him feel exposed. Need reminded him of every lesson his mother had carved into him. Never beg, never show hunger, never enter a room without knowing what the other person wants. That was when Belmont Global stopped looking like a possible partner and started looking like the answer. Belmont Global had everything Reeve Capital lacked in that dangerous season. It had old trust. It had family land. It had long-term capital. It had a reputation built over decades, not over headlines. While Callaway's firm moved with speed and sharp ambition, Belmont Global carried the kind of stability that made investors breathe easier. Orson Belmont had built his company slowly. He did not chase every trend. He did not gamble with his name for fast applause. He made decisions with patience, and that patience had become his power. Callaway respected that. He also needed it. A partnership with Belmont Global would do more than bring money into Reeve Capital. It would tell the market that Orson Belmont trusted him. It would tell banks that Callaway's firm still had powerful support. It would tell rivals that Reeve Capital had not lost its place. The deal would give Callaway access to land tied to future housing and development projects. It would place his firm beside a company known for reliability. It would cover the weakness left by the failed expansion and replace fear with confidence. On paper, it made perfect business sense. That was how Callaway first justified it to himself. He told himself Belmont Global needed modern investment strength. He told himself Reeve Capital would bring speed, structure, and growth. He told himself both families would benefit. But one problem stood between Callaway and the deal. Orson Belmont did not trust easily. He had seen too many charming men ask for partnership while hiding hunger. He understood ambition because he had built his own empire. He knew when a man wanted business, and he knew when that man wanted rescue. Callaway needed a path past that caution. That path was Zinnia. Not because she controlled Belmont Global, not because she signed the contracts, because Orson loved her more than anything he owned. Zinnia softened the rooms where Orson stayed guarded. Her happiness mattered to him. Her trust carried weight with him. If she believed in Callaway, Orson would look at him longer, listen to him more, give him time he might have denied another man. Callaway understood that truth. At first, he hated himself for understanding it. Later, he used it. Iona Reeves saw the situation more clearly than Callaway wanted her to. She had built her life on strategy. To her, love was useful only when it helped someone gain power, protect power, or punish an enemy. She had never trusted tenderness. She believed tenderness made people careless. She believed affection gave others a handle to hold. Callaway had learned many of his habits from her: the silence, the control, the refusal to admit pain, the belief that every relationship carried a hidden balance sheet. One evening, after another tense meeting with Reeve Capital's senior team, Callaway found Iona waiting in his office. She sat near the window, dressed in pale silk, one leg crossed over the other, looking out at the city like she owned its secrets. "You look tired," she said. Callaway loosened his tie. "I'm handling it." "You're containing it," Iona replied. "That's not the same thing." He said nothing. She turned from the window and studied him with the cool patience that had shaped his childhood. "Belmont Global is the answer." "I know." "No," she said. "You know the company is the answer. You have not accepted the door." Callaway's jaw tightened. "Orson is not easy to move." "No powerful father is easy to move," Iona said. "But every powerful father has one place where judgment softens." Callaway looked at her. Iona smiled without warmth. His daughter. The words sat between them. Callaway felt immediate resistance, not because the thought was false, but because it was too clear. Zinnia Belmont was not like the women who moved through his social world chasing attention. She seemed sincere, careful, kind in a way that did not feel performed. Iona saw his hesitation and leaned forward. "Do not look so offended. I'm not asking you to harm the girl. I'm asking you to understand the family." "She is not a tool," Callaway said. Iona's expression barely changed. "Everyone is a tool to someone, Callaway. The only difference is whether you use people before they use you." He hated that sentence. He hated that part of him believed it. Callaway did not leave his mother's office-style advice feeling proud. He left angry. Not at Iona alone, at himself, because some part of him had already thought what she said. He had already noticed how Orson's face softened when Zinnia entered a room. He had already seen how executives changed their tone when she cared about a project. He had already understood that winning Zinnia's trust would bring him closer to the center of Belmont power. He had not named it yet. Iona gave the thought a name. That made it harder to deny. For days, Callaway tried to push the idea away. He told himself Reeve Capital would recover through negotiation, restructuring, and discipline. He told himself he did not need to involve a woman who had done nothing to him. He told himself he was not the kind of man who would turn affection into strategy. But pressure has a way of changing the sound of conscience. At first, conscience speaks clearly. Later, it starts sounding inconvenient. Every report from the failed expansion made Iona's words return. Every cautious call from a lender made Belmont Global look more necessary. Every rival's quiet smile made Calloway feel cornered. He began researching Zinnia more carefully. He learned about her charity work, not from gossip pages, but from foundation reports. He saw that she visited projects herself. She read proposals. She cared about housing, children, education, and family safety. She was not a shallow heiress waiting to be admired. She was thoughtful. That should have stopped him. Instead, it helped him. He realized the easiest way to reach Zinnia was not through flattery. She had heard flattery all her life. He would have to listen. He would have to notice. He would have to make her feel seen before he ever asked for trust. The thought unsettled him. It also formed a plan. Calloway told himself he was not doing anything cruel. He would not mistreat her. He would not embarrass her. He would offer respect, companionship, and a marriage that served both families. He turned manipulation into logic because logic felt cleaner than guilt. That is how ambition wins. It does not always shout. Sometimes it speaks in reasonable sentences until wrong begins to feel necessary. Once Calloway accepted the plan, he built it with the same precision he brought to business. He would not rush. Rushing would expose hunger. He would meet Zinnia in the right room, speak to her with restraint, and avoid the desperate interest she had likely seen from other men. He would ask about what mattered to her. Not as a trick, he told himself, but as a way to build real comfort between them. That was how he made the lie easier to carry. He separated motive from behavior. His motive was Belmont Global. His behavior would be kindness. In his mind, that made the plan less cruel. He told himself Zinnia would not suffer. She would marry a successful man. She would receive loyalty in public, protection in wealthy rooms, and a husband who respected her family. Their marriage would help her father's company and save his own. Everyone would gain something. He repeated that until it sounded almost honorable. Court Zinnia. Earn Orson's trust, marry into the family, secure the partnership, protect Reeve Capital, treat her kindly. The order mattered. Love was not in it, not at first. Calloway believed love was too uncertain to build a future on. He had seen affection used as weakness. He had watched Iona turn every tender thing into a negotiation. He believed respect was enough. He believed good manners were enough. He believed a gentle lie would hurt no one if the life built around it looked stable. But truth has a way of waiting. It waits through dinners. It waits through vows. It waits through soft mornings and public praise. It waits while one person falls honestly and the other keeps a secret under his tongue. Calloway did not plan to fall for Zinnia. That became the part he never controlled. The more he studied her, the more he saw her. The more he listened, the more her heart reached places in him he had trained himself to guard. The more she trusted him, the heavier the hidden motive became. Still, he moved forward. He thought he would manage the lie. He thought kindness would protect them from the damage. But a kind lie still breaks trust when truth arrives. And one day, Zinnia would hear the truth from his own mouth. Boston welcomed Zinnia Belmont with cold air, polished stone buildings, and a business crowd that already knew her name before she reached the conference hall. The summit had drawn investors, founders, family company heirs, nonprofit leaders, and advisors who spoke in careful tones around money. Zinnia had attended as part of her father's delegation, though Orson insisted she stay close enough to observe and far enough to decide what kind of leader she wanted to become. She wore a cream dress beneath a soft gray coat, elegant enough for the room, simple enough not to invite too much attention. That was always her balance. She had learned to look prepared without looking like she wanted the spotlight. Calloway Reeve entered later that morning. Zinnia noticed him because the room changed around him. People did not rush him, yet their attention shifted. A banker stopped mid-sentence. A young founder straightened his jacket. Two investors near the coffee table lowered their voices as he passed. Calloway did not appear impressed by any of it. He moved with calm focus, greeting people by name, giving them only enough warmth to feel remembered, never enough access to feel close. His confidence was quiet, controlled, and practiced. Zinnia had heard of him before. Everyone had. Reeve Capital had become one of the fastest-growing investment firms in New York. Callaway was called bold by some, careful by others, and impossible to read by almost everyone. He was young for the power he held, but he carried, himself, like a man twice his age. Their first exchange happened during a panel break. Orson was speaking with two executives near the front of the hall when Callaway approached. He greeted Orson with respect, not flattery. That caught Zinnia's attention. Most men became too eager around her father. Callaway did not. Orson introduced him to Zinnia with the mild caution he reserved for men he had not fully measured. Callaway turned to her. For 1 second, his expression shifted. Not much. Enough. "Miss Belmont," he said, "I've been hoping to meet you." Zinnia had heard that line before, but the way he said it made her wonder whether this time it meant something different. Zinnia expected the usual questions. Most people began with her father's company. Some asked about Belmont Global's development plans. Others asked whether Orson was open to new partnerships. Men with ambition often dressed business interest in social conversation, but Zinnia had learned to hear the purpose beneath the manners. Callaway did not begin there. After Orson stepped aside to take a call, Callaway turned his full attention to Zinnia and said, "I read the report from your children's housing fund." Zinnia paused. That was not what she expected. "You read foundation reports?" she asked, "only the ones with ideas worth studying." His answer was calm, not showy. No grin meant to impress her, no dramatic praise. Just a statement, direct and steady. Zinnia studied him. Most people mention the gala photos before they mention the housing fund. "Photos are easy to notice," Callaway said. "The work matters more." For the first time that morning, Zinnia forgot to prepare her polite response. The Children's Housing Fund was close to her heart. It supported safe apartments for families leaving unstable living conditions, with support for schooling, childcare, and job placement. Zinnia had spent months reading proposals, visiting sites, and arguing for long-term help instead of short public campaigns. Most people praised the charity because it made them sound decent. Callaway asked about the structure. "How are you keeping families supported after the first 6 months?" he asked. "That is where many programs lose them." Zinnia blinked. It was a real question, not shallow, not decorative, not designed for easy praise. "We partner with local groups already trusted by the families," she said. "The goal is not to drop help into a neighborhood and vanish. The goal is to stay long enough for stability to become normal." Callaway listened without interrupting. His eyes stayed on her face, not her jewelry, not the Belmont name badge on her table card, not the executives moving around her father. That should have been ordinary. To Zinnia, it felt rare. By the time Orson returned, Zinnia had said more to Callaway than she had planned to say to anyone at the summit, and Callaway had done the one thing that reached her faster than charm. He had asked about what she loved before asking what her father owned. Zinnia had met many men who knew how to speak. Callaway knew how to listen. That was what unsettled her. During the luncheon that followed the first panel, she found herself seated 2 chairs away from him. The placement felt accidental, but Callaway's world rarely left things to chance. Zinnia did not know that yet. A venture banker spoke too long about market timing. A developer boasted about waterfront projects. Someone praised Orson's discipline and asked whether Belmont Global planned to expand its private housing portfolio. Zinnia smiled through it all, giving careful answers when needed, never saying enough to become the center of the table. Callaway noticed. When the conversation shifted away from her, he leaned slightly closer, keeping his voice low enough for only her to hear. "You disappear well in rooms that keep pointing at you." Zinnia turned to him. The words reached a place she did not expect. She had spent years doing exactly that, standing in rooms where everyone knew her, yet almost no one understood her, smiling enough to seem gracious, speaking enough to seem present, holding back enough to stay safe. "What makes you say that?" she asked. "You answer every question without giving people the part of you they are asking for." Zinnia should have felt exposed. Instead, she felt seen. Callaway did not smile, as though he had won something. He looked at her with quiet attention, as if her answer mattered more than his observation. "Some rooms take more than they deserve," she said. He nodded. So you learned to leave only your manners behind. That was the moment Zinnia truly looked at him, not as the famous investor, not as a man circling her father's company, as a person who had noticed something she rarely explained. Most wealthy men tried to impress her with access, stories, or expensive confidence. They spoke at her, around her, through her. Calloway did something different. He made silence feel like a shared language. For the rest of the luncheon, Zinnia found herself aware of him in small ways. The way he placed his glass down before answering. The way he never raised his voice to compete. The way his attention returned to her without demanding hers back. By the end of the meal, Zinnia felt a quiet danger. Not fear. Interest. And interest for a guarded heart was never a small thing. After Boston, Zinnia expected Calloway to fade into the usual circle of men who made a strong first impression and sent forgettable messages later. He did not. His first note came 2 days after the summit. It was brief, respectful, and focused on the housing fund. He had attached an article about long-term community partnerships with one line beneath it. Your point about stability becoming normal stayed with me. Zinnia read the message twice. He had remembered her words. She waited before replying, not because she wanted to play games, but because careful women learn not to reward every well-timed gesture. When she answered, she kept it polite. Thank you. Most people want results before roots, Calloway replied within an hour. Roots are harder to photograph. That is why serious people should care about them. That line made her smile before she caught herself. Their conversation began there. At first, it stayed professional. Reports, community programs, business ethics, philanthropy that lasted beyond public praise. Calloway never pressed for too much. He gave space. He asked questions. He remembered details. A month later, they met again at a business dinner in New York. This time, Zinnia felt her guard shift before he even greeted her. He asked whether the housing fund had solved its child care transport issue. She had mentioned it once, briefly. He remembered. That mattered. Soon, calls followed, not late at night, not improper, not rushed. They spoke in the early evening, often after meetings, with Zinnia near her library window and Calloway in his office, city lights behind him. He asked about books. She asked about the pressure of his work. He gave careful answers at first. Later, they grew more personal. One Saturday, he invited her to a museum exhibit on American portraiture. Zinnia almost declined. It felt too close to a date, and she was not sure she was ready for the meaning of that. But Orson was busy. Her weekend felt too quiet, and Calloway had asked with no pressure in his voice. So she went. They walked slowly through the museum, speaking in soft tones. He asked what made a face honest in a painted portrait. She said, "The eyes. People always think they hide more than they do." Calloway looked at her longer than he should have. For the first time, Zinnia wondered what his eyes were hiding. Zinnia did not fall quickly. She fell in careful steps. One honest question, one remembered detail, one quiet walk, one moment where Calloway looked at her as if the noise around them had disappeared. Her loneliness had always been difficult to explain because it lived inside privilege. People expected her to be grateful, and she was. She loved her father. She valued the life he had built. She understood the doors her name opened. Still, open doors did not always lead to belonging. Calloway seemed to understand that without forcing her to defend it. During one lunch at a small private restaurant, Zinnia told him about a fundraiser where 3 different guests had praised her work, only to ask for introductions to Orson before dessert. She said it lightly, with a smile trained by years of practice. Calloway did not laugh. "That must get lonely," he said. The words were simple, but they struck harder than any compliment. Zinnia looked down at her water glass. "People do not like hearing loneliness from someone like me, because they confuse comfort with being known." She looked up. That sentence stayed with her. Most people tried to correct her feelings. Calloway named them. He did not tell her she had no reason to feel alone. He did not list her advantages like evidence against her heart. He did not treat her sadness as ingratitude. He gave it room. That was the place where Zinnia's guard began to soften. She found herself telling him things she usually kept private, how she hated being praised for grace when people really meant obedience. How she missed her mother most during public events because her mother had known when Zinnia's smile was tired. How she wanted to do something meaningful with the Belmont name without becoming trapped by it. Calloway listened. Sometimes his face held a tension she did not understand. It was not boredom. It was not judgment. It was something closer to guilt, though Zinnia had no reason to see it that way yet. To her, it looked like care. By the end of that lunch, she believed Calloway understood a part of her most people walked past. That belief became the first thread of trust between them, and trust, once given by a lonely heart, carries deep weight. Calloway had entered Zinnia's life with a plan. At the beginning, he studied her the way he studied any important room. He noticed what made her smile, what made her withdraw, what subjects brought warmth to her voice, and which compliments made her uncomfortable. He learned quickly that Zinnia did not respond to display. She responded to sincerity. That should have made him stop. Instead, it made him more careful. He told himself he was being respectful. He told himself attention was not harm. He told himself his motives did not matter as long as he treated her with patience and care. But Zinnia had a way of making excuses feel smaller. One afternoon, after a museum walk, they passed a young mother struggling to lift a stroller down the steps near the entrance. A staff member had not noticed. People moved around her, too busy to stop. Zinnia stopped at once. She did not announce it. She did not turn it into a performance. She stepped forward, smiled at the mother, and helped guide the stroller safely down. When the child dropped a small toy, Zinnia picked it up, wiped it gently with a tissue, and handed it back with a warmth that had no audience. Calloway watched from a few feet away. Something in him shifted. He had seen people donate millions without kindness in their hands. He had seen names on charity walls owned by people who never looked a struggling person in the eye. Zinnia was different. Her care did not need witnesses. That bothered him, because if she was only a path to Belmont Global, life would be easier. If she were shallow, vain, or careless, he might have carried his plan without feeling the weight of it. But Zinnia kept proving herself real. On another day, she remembered that his assistant had a sick father and asked whether the family had support. Calloway had mentioned it once. Zinnia remembered because pain mattered to her, even when it belonged to someone outside her circle. That night, Calloway sat in his office longer than usual. He opened the file on the Belmont partnership, but his mind returned to Zinnia's voice. Soft, steady, honest. He had planned to make her trust him. He had not planned to trust the feeling he had around her. He had not planned for her kindness to reach him. Yet it did. And that was the first sign that his plan was becoming something he no longer fully controlled. Orson Belmont did not trust charm too quickly. He had lived long enough to know that polished words often hid hunger. He had seen men bow their heads in respect while counting what they wanted to take. He had watched business partners smile through dinner, praise his values, shake his hand, and still try to twist a contract in their favor by morning. So when Calloway Reeve began spending more time around Zinnia, Orson paid attention. He noticed how Calloway entered a room. He noticed how Calloway listened. He noticed how Calloway spoke less around powerful men, yet somehow made every answer feel controlled. That was rare. Orson respected discipline. He respected intelligence. He even respected ambition when it came with honor. But Calloway's ambition had a shine that made Orson careful. It was too sharp to ignore. Zinnia, however, seemed different around him. That was what complicated everything. Orson saw his daughter smile in a way she had not smiled in years. Not the public smile she wore at charity dinners, not the polite one she gave people who praised her father more than they spoke to her. This smile came slowly, almost against her own guard. Calloway had reached a place many men had failed to reach, and Orson saw that too. One evening, after a private dinner at the Belmont estate, Orson watched Calloway walk Zinnia to the terrace. They stood beneath the warm garden lights, speaking quietly. Calloway did not touch her. He did not need to. Zinnia's face had already softened. That was the moment Orson made his decision. Later, as guests drifted toward their cars and staff cleared the dining room, Orson asked Calloway to join him. "My study," he said. Calloway looked at him, calm as always. "Of course." The study was lined with old books, family photographs, and dark wood shelves. It was not a room built to impress strangers. It was a room where Orson made decisions. Calloway stepped inside. Orson closed the door. For the first time that night, the air between them held no politeness, only truth waiting to be spoken. Orson did not offer Calloway a drink. That alone said enough. He walked to his desk, rested one hand on the back of his leather chair, and studied the younger man standing across from him. Calloway remained still, but Orson could see the alertness in his eyes. Good, Orson thought. Let him understand this is not dinner conversation. My daughter likes you, Orson said. Calloway did not smile. I care about her. Orson watched him closely. That was not what I said. A brief silence followed. Calloway gave a small nod, accepting the correction. Orson moved toward the window. Outside, the garden lights glowed over the white roses Zinnia's mother had loved. Those flowers had been planted years before, back when the estate held more laughter and less memory. Zinnia has spent her life being approached by people who wanted something, Orson said. Some wanted money, some wanted access, some wanted my attention, some wanted the Belmont name beside theirs. Calloway's expression stayed controlled. Orson turned back to him. I have seen many men look at her and see a door. Calloway's jaw tightened slightly. Orson noticed. My daughter is not a door, Mr. Reeve. She is not a business arrangement. She is not a bridge into Belmont Global. She is not a soft path toward my approval. Calloway held his gaze. Orson continued, his voice lower now. She is a person, a good one, better than most people deserve. She believes in loyalty. She gives trust carefully, but when she gives it with her whole heart. A faint shift crossed Calloway's face. For 1 second, Orson thought he saw discomfort, not guilt exactly. Something close. Orson stepped nearer. If your interest in her has anything to do with my company, leave now, leave cleanly. She will hurt, but she will recover. If you stay and make her love you under false terms, you will do damage money cannot repair. Calloway did not answer at once. That pause told Orson the warning had landed. Do you understand me? Orson asked. Calloway said, Yes, sir. But understanding is not the same as obedience, and Orson knew that better than anyone. Calloway had prepared for many kinds of business pressure. He had faced angry investors, suspicious lenders, rival executives, and board members who tested every number placed before them. But Orson Belmont's warning reached him in a way those meetings never had. Because Orson was not speaking as a businessman. He was speaking as a father. Calloway understood strategy. He understood leverage. He understood how to read a man across a table. But this was different. Orson was offering him a chance to step away before the lie grew roots. That should have been mercy. To Calloway, it felt like exposure. He thought of Reeve Capital, the stalled expansion, the nervous investors, his mother's voice telling him Belmont Global was the answer. He thought of the pressure sitting on his shoulders every morning before sunrise. He also thought of Zinnia. Her quiet smile at the museum, her voice when she spoke about families needing dignity, the way she listened to him as if his answers mattered beyond wealth and status. That was the problem. If Zinnia had been shallow, his plan would have been easier to carry, but she was not. Orson stood before him, waiting. Calloway knew the right answer. He also knew the full truth. The full truth was that Belmont Global mattered. Orson's trust mattered. Zinnia's closeness to her father mattered. His plan had begun with need, not love. But another truth had started pressing against it. He did care for her, not cleanly, not honestly, not enough to confess everything. But he cared. So when Calloway spoke, his voice held enough truth to sound convincing. I care about Zinnia, he said. Orson did not move. Calloway continued. She is not like anyone I have known. I respect her. I would never treat her carelessly. That last sentence carried the worst lie, because he wanted it to be true. Orson searched his face. Never make her question that. Calloway swallowed once. I won't. The promise left his mouth like a vow borrowed from a better man. Orson accepted it because fathers are strongest and weakest where their children are concerned. Calloway left the study with Orson's warning still in his ears. He told himself he would protect Zinnia from pain, but he did not protect her from the lie. The wedding took place in the Belmont Garden on a bright spring afternoon. Zinnia had refused a grand hotel ballroom, even though half of New York expected one. She did not want a crowded display built for society pages. She wanted the garden where her mother had once planted white roses with her own hands. Those roses meant more to Zinnia than any chandelier or marble hall. They carried memory. They carried warmth. They carried the part of her family that wealth had not touched. The ceremony was small by Belmont standards, though powerful names still filled the rows. Business leaders sat beside old family friends. Charity partners stood near relatives. Reporters waited far beyond the gates, hoping to catch enough details to feed public fascination. Orson walked Zinnia down the garden aisle. She wore a simple satin gown with clean lines and a veil that moved softly in the spring air. No heavy jewels, no loud display. Only grace. Calloway stood beneath a flowered arch, watching her approach. For a moment the noise inside him quieted. Zinnia's eyes were fixed on him with trust so open it almost hurt to meet. She was not walking toward a contract. She was not walking toward a business solution. She was walking toward a man she believed had chosen her. Calloway felt his chest tighten. He had planned this. He had wanted this. Yet standing there, with Orson beside her and white roses surrounding them, the plan felt smaller than the woman walking toward him. Zinnia reached him. Orson placed her hand in Calloway's. It was a simple gesture, but Calloway felt the weight of it. A father handing over trust. A daughter offering love. A family opening its private door. Zinnia smiled at him, not a public smile, a real one. Calloway returned it, but something under his ribs ached. He told himself it was nerves. He told himself every groom felt overwhelmed. But when the officiant began speaking, Calloway knew the feeling had another name: guilt. When Zinnia began her vows, Calloway found it hard to breathe evenly. Her voice was steady at first. She spoke of friendship, patience, loyalty, and the kind of love that did not need a crowd to prove it existed. She said he had made her feel seen in rooms where she had spent years feeling used. She said he had taught her that strength did not always arrive loudly. Calloway stood before her, hearing every word like a judgment, not because she meant to condemn him, because she did not. That was what made it worse. Zinnia's trust was pure. She was not suspicious. She was not guarded in that moment. She was not measuring him against old disappointments. She was offering him a future with a heart that still believed love could be honest. Calloway looked at her hands. They trembled slightly around the folded paper. He wanted to reach out and steady them. He also wanted to confess. The thought came so quickly it startled him. Tell her. Tell her now. Tell her the first reason you came close. Tell her about the pressure. Tell her about Belmont Global. Tell her before she gives you the rest of her life. But the garden was full. Orson stood close. The officiant waited. Guests watched with soft smiles. Every future Calloway had fought to secure seemed balanced on that one moment. So he stayed silent. When it was his turn, he spoke the vows he had written with care. He promised to honor her. He promised to stand beside her. He promised to protect the peace she brought into his life. Those words were not empty. That frightened him most. Somewhere between the plan and the wedding day, Zinnia had become real to him, more than useful, more than beautiful, more than the daughter of Orson Belmont. She had become someone whose pain he did not want to cause. Yet the lie remained beneath every promise. Zinnia looked at him with tears in her eyes. Calloway slipped the ring onto her finger. The guests applauded. Zinnia smiled like a woman who had found home. Calloway smiled back like a man already standing inside a debt he did not know how to repay. Their first months of marriage did not feel like strategy. That surprised Calloway more than anything. He had expected routine, public appearances, family dinners, business discussions with Orson, carefully managed affection that kept Zinnia content and kept the Belmont partnership moving toward approval. Instead, marriage with Zinnia became quiet in ways he had never known. She did not wake each morning demanding jewels, praise, or proof of status. She wanted breakfast at the small table near the kitchen windows. She wanted to know if he had slept. She wanted him to taste the tea she loved and tell her honestly if it was too bitter. Calloway had bought buildings with less hesitation than he showed over simple tenderness. One morning, Zinnia came downstairs with her hair loosely pinned and a book tucked under her arm. He was already reading market updates at the table. Without scolding him, she placed a plate before him. "You cannot build an empire on coffee alone," she said. He looked up, ready with a dry answer, but her smile stopped him. So he ate. Later, evenings found them in the library. Zinnia read beside him while he reviewed reports. Sometimes no one spoke for an hour, yet the silence did not feel empty. It felt safe. That word made Calloway uneasy because safety had never been part of his training. On difficult days, he came home tense from meetings. Zinnia noticed before he spoke. She would stand before him, touch his sleeve, and ask, "Is this a day for silence or truth?" At first, he chose silence. Little by little, he chose truth. One night, after a brutal investor call, he leaned down and kissed her forehead before he could stop himself. It was not for anyone watching. No cameras, no guests, no Orson nearby. Only Zinnia. She closed her eyes, and for one brief second, Calloway felt the life he was pretending to build become real in his hands. Rain came hard another evening, tapping against the kitchen windows as Zinnia tried to hide her tiredness after a long foundation meeting. Calloway took her hand and pulled her gently away from the counter. There was no music. Still, they moved slowly together. Zinnia laughed softly against his chest. Calloway held her closer than he meant to. He had planned to treat her kindly. He had not planned to need the peace she gave him. Zinnia Belmont Reeve had every kind of luxury people thought a woman should want. She had rooms filled with fine furniture. She had designer gowns chosen for formal dinners. She had cars waiting outside grand entrances. She had jewelry locked in velvet boxes, most of which she rarely touched. So when she married Calloway, she did not ask him for more things. She asked for time. That confused him at first. Calloway had known women who measured affection through gifts. He had known people who treated love like a public display, something to prove through travel, diamonds, expensive dinners, and praise in front of the right people. Zinnia wanted none of that as proof. She wanted him at breakfast without his phone taking over the table. She wanted him to come home early enough to speak before sleep claimed them both. She wanted honesty when his day went badly. She wanted peace in the house, not the cold silence of two people performing marriage for the outside world. At first, Calloway treated those requests like small habits he needed to learn. He placed his phone face down during breakfast. He tried to answer when she asked how he truly felt. He stopped taking late calls in the bedroom when she looked too tired to pretend it did not hurt. None of this seemed large, yet it touched places in him he had kept guarded for years. Zinnia did not demand his money. She did not compete with his work. She did not ask to own his time like a trophy. She asked to be part of his life. That was harder for Calloway than buying anything. Buying was easy. Presence required surrender. One evening, when he came home late again, he expected disappointment. He expected a quiet rebuke. He expected Zinnia to remind him that marriage needed effort. Instead, she had left dinner covered on the table and a note beside it. "Eat first, explain later." I know today was heavy. Calloway stood there for a long moment. He had expected to be judged. Zinnia had chosen care. That kind of love did not corner him. It invited him, and that made it far more difficult to use her without feeling the weight of what he was doing. In the beginning, Calloway knew exactly when to play the husband Zinnia deserved. He knew when to reach for her hand at formal dinners. He knew when to place a gentle palm near her back as they crossed crowded rooms. He knew when to smile at her in front of Orson, when to praise her foundation work, and when to speak about their marriage with the quiet respect wealthy audiences admired. Calloway had built a career on timing. Affection became another kind of timing. At first, it worked. Zinnia relaxed beside him. Orson watched with softer eyes. Guests praised their closeness. Every public gesture served the story Calloway needed people to believe. But the danger began in private. A performance needs an audience. With Zinnia, some moments had none. One night, she fell asleep in the library with a book open across her lap. Calloway entered the room to collect a file he had left on the desk. He stopped when he saw her there, curled into the armchair, one hand resting near the page. He should have walked past. Instead, he took the book gently, marked the page, and placed it on the side table. Zinnia stirred but did not wake. A loose strand of hair had fallen across her cheek. Calloway reached to move it before he thought better of it. His fingers brushed her skin softly. No one saw. No one praised him. No business advantage came from tenderness in an empty room. Still, he did it. That unsettled him. Another morning, she stood near the kitchen window, reading a message from one of the housing program directors. Her face looked tired, but her eyes stayed kind. Calloway walked over and placed a cup of tea beside her. She smiled at him with surprise. "Thank you," she said. "It was getting cold," he replied, though that was not the reason. He had noticed her. That was all. He began to notice too much. The way her voice softened when she spoke to children, the way she grew quiet when people praised her only for beauty, the way she always asked staff members if they had eaten before she sat down herself. Calloway had planned to imitate devotion. But slowly, imitation began to borrow truth. Calloway returned from investor meetings with the same face every time, controlled, still, untouched. To most people, that face meant strength. To Zinnia, it began to look like a wall holding back damage. She learned his signs. When he removed his cufflinks too carefully, the meeting had gone badly. When he poured a drink and left it untouched, someone had questioned him harder than expected. When he stood near the window without turning on a lamp, he was fighting thoughts he did not want to name. Zinnia never rushed him. That was one of the reasons he started trusting her presence, even when he feared what trust might cost. One evening, he came home after a private call with two major investors. The meeting had lasted longer than planned. The questions had been direct. The failed expansion had not been named as a crisis, but everyone in the room had spoken as though danger had already entered. Calloway walked into the house, removed his jacket, and said nothing. Zinnia was in the sitting room reviewing notes for a foundation meeting. She looked up once and closed the folder. "Come here," she said gently. "I need to work." "You need to sit." He almost refused, but exhaustion won. He sat on the edge of the sofa, elbows resting on his knees, hands linked so tightly his knuckles paled. Zinnia moved beside him. She did not touch him at first. She let him keep the last piece of control he thought he needed. After a long silence, she said, "You do not have to be impressive in this room." Calloway gave a humorless breath. "That is all anyone pays me to be." "I am not paying you." The words reached him. He turned his head slightly, but he did not answer. Zinnia studied him with care. "You call it pressure because pain sounds too human." Calloway closed his eyes. No investor had ever spoken to him that way. No rival, no board member, no one. Zinnia saw past ambition and found the tired man beneath it. That should have comforted him. Instead, it frightened him, because a woman who saw him that clearly would also be the woman most wounded when the truth came out. That night changed something between them. Calloway did not tell Zinnia everything. He did not confess the plan. He did not speak of Belmont Global as the rescue he needed. He did not admit how close his ambition had come to her father's trust, but he gave her a door into his past. It began with one sentence. "My mother would hate this." Zinnia turned toward him. "Hate what?" "Me sitting here like this." "Like what?" Calloway looked down at his hands. Tired, uncertain, needing someone to notice. Zinnia stayed quiet. So he continued. He told her about Iona Reeve, not the polished version society knew, not the elegant woman who sat on boards, hosted private dinners, and spoke about legacy like she had invented the word. He told Zinnia about the mother who believed tenderness was a weakness people used against you. He told her how Iona corrected him as a child when he cried, how she taught him to read adults before trusting them, how she praised victory more than kindness, how she once told him that love was safe only when the other person needed you more. Zinnia listened without pity. That mattered. Calloway hated pity. It made him feel small. Zinnia gave him something different, attention without judgment, sadness without insult, care without control. "So you learned to win before you learned how to rest," she said. Calloway looked at her. The sentence felt too exact. "I learned to win before I learned how to love," he said, surprising himself with the honesty of it. Zinnia's face softened. She reached for his hand, giving him time to pull away. He did not. Her fingers closed around his. For a moment, Calloway let himself accept the comfort. No strategy, no audience, no reward. Only Zinnia beside him, holding the part of him his mother had trained him to hide. He should have told her more. He knew that later. That night, the truth had come close enough to be spoken, but fear stood between his confession and her trust. So he kept the worst part buried and accepted her comfort anyway. After that night, Calloway began coming home differently. Not always early, not always open, but differently. The house no longer felt like another place where he needed to perform. With Zinnia, he found a quiet rhythm that made the noise of his life less sharp. He began looking for her when he entered. If she was in the library, he felt his shoulders ease. If she was in the kitchen, speaking softly to staff while tasting soup from a spoon, he paused longer than he meant to. If she was upstairs with foundation reports spread across the bed, glasses low on her nose, he felt something close to peace before he remembered peace was not part of the plan. That was what scared him. Zinnia had moved from useful to necessary. At first, she had been the bridge to Orson Belmont. Then, she became the person Calloway wanted to call when a meeting went wrong. She became the face he searched for across rooms filled with people who wanted his power. She became the one voice that did not demand performance before offering care. He hated how much that mattered, because needing Zinnia meant the lie had changed shape. A cold lie is easy to understand. It has a purpose, it has an end, it has no tenderness to complicate it. But this lie had begun growing roots in real feeling. Calloway found himself protecting moments with her while still protecting the secret that would destroy them. He wanted her near. He wanted the partnership signed. He wanted Orson's trust. He wanted Zinnia's forgiveness for a truth she did not yet know. He wanted too many things that could not live honestly in the same room. One morning, Zinnia sat across from him at breakfast, reading a letter from one of the families her foundation had helped. Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "They got the apartment?" she said. "The little boy has his own bed now." Calloway watched her joy over a child she had never met. Something in him ached. This was the woman he had used as strategy. This was the woman who made him want to become better while he kept choosing worse. He feared losing her. He feared being known by her even more. While Calloway's feelings grew more complicated, the business plan kept moving. Belmont Global and Reeve Capital entered deeper discussions. Teams met weekly. Lawyers reviewed terms. Analysts prepared projections. Orson asked harder questions than most men dared to ask Calloway, but he no longer treated him like an outsider. That was progress. It should have pleased Calloway without conflict. Instead, every step forward carried two meanings. To Reeve Capital, the partnership meant stability. To investors, it meant confidence. To Orson, it meant a possible alliance with a son-in-law who seemed disciplined enough to trust. To Zinnia, it meant family and future joining hands. To Calloway, it meant rescue and guilt. He sat in meetings beside Orson, answering questions about risk, long-term development, and expansion structure. He spoke clearly. He offered transparency where it served him. He gave enough truth to sound honorable while holding back the reason he needed the deal so badly. Sometimes Zinnia joined these discussions. That made it worse. She listened with sharp attention, not as a decoration, not as a silent wife, but as a woman learning the language of power. She asked questions that impressed even Orson. Who carries the community responsibility if projections shift? What safeguards protect the housing branch from investor pressure? Who benefits first if the market turns? Calloway watched her across the table and felt pride before fear followed. She was not only kind, she was intelligent. She was not only gentle, she was clear. Every time she spoke, she became less useful as an illusion and more dangerous as a truth, because Zinnia would notice cracks if he let them show. Still, Calloway moved forward. He told himself he would fix the company first and confess later. He told himself timing mattered. He told himself love did not require every truth at once. Those were the lies men tell when they want the comfort of goodness without the cost of honesty. And this is where I want you to think deeply. Do you believe Calloway had already started loving Zinnia here, or was he still using her while hiding behind soft feelings? Drop your answer in the comments, because a lie mixed with real feelings hurts more than a lie with no feeling at all. Verity Cross did not return to Calloway Reeves' life with noise. She returned through rooms where people spoke softly, smiled carefully, and used introductions like currency. By then, Calloway and Zinnia had become familiar faces at foundation dinners, investment receptions, private auctions, and charity previews across New York. Their marriage had strengthened the public trust around Reeve Capital and deepened the connection with Belmont Global. That was the kind of world Verity knew well. She worked in luxury brand consulting, but her true skill was placement. She knew where to stand, who to greet first, whose hand to touch lightly during conversation, and whose attention would make her look important to everyone else. Verity understood wealthy circles because she had spent years studying them from the edges. She had beauty, confidence, and the kind of polished voice that made casual words sound expensive. She wore elegance like armor. Every smile had purpose. Every compliment carried a hook. Every laugh arrived at the exact moment a powerful man needed to feel interesting. Calloway saw her again at a private art reception on the Upper East Side. Zinnia was across the room speaking to a children's education director. Orson was in conversation with two board members near the entrance. Calloway had stepped aside to take a call when Verity approached him with a glass of champagne and a smile that suggested she had never left his world at all. "Calloway Reeve," she said, "marriage has made you harder to find." He looked at her, surprised for only a second before control returned to his face. "Verity," she tilted her head. "That's all I get? No warmth for an old friend? You were never easy to classify." Her smile widened. "That sounds like a compliment from you." Calloway should have ended the conversation there. He knew that. Verity belonged to a part of his life that had no place near Zinnia. She carried old secrets, old vanity, old habits. She knew the version of him that liked admiration without questions. Still, he stayed. Only for a minute, he told himself, only to be polite. But some doors do not need force to open. They only need a man to stand too close for too long. Verity had known Calloway before Zinnia softened his name in public. Back then, he was colder, sharper, and easier to flatter. He moved through private clubs and late dinners with the confidence of a man who believed control was the same as peace. Verity had liked that version of him because he never asked for love. He wanted admiration, clever conversation, and company that did not ask him to explain the empty places behind his success. That suited Verity. She did not want to heal a man. She wanted access to the world around him. Years earlier, their connection had been convenient. A few private dinners, late calls, a shared understanding that neither owed the other too much truth. Verity praised his ambition, laughed at his dry remarks, and made him feel chosen without making him feel known. For a man like Calloway, that kind of attention was easy. It asked nothing of his conscience. When Verity returned, she knew exactly where to press. She did not begin by insulting Zinnia. Not at first. That would have made Calloway defensive. Instead, she admired what he had built. "Reeve Capital is everywhere now," she told him during a brief conversation at another event. "People say your marriage helped. I think they are wrong." Calloway's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you?" "I think they needed a softer story for a man they already feared." That line reached his pride. Verity saw it. She lowered her voice. "Zinnia gives the public something pretty to believe in. But you built the machine." Calloway should have corrected her. He should have said Zinnia was more than a public comfort. He should have said his wife had instincts, discipline, and a mind many people underestimated. Instead, he looked away. That small silence gave Verity permission. She stepped closer into it. "You always did let people benefit from your strength," she said, "even when they acted like they gave it to you." Calloway heard the danger. He also heard the praise. Zinnia made him answer for who he was becoming. Verity made him feel like he had never been wrong. That difference mattered more than he wanted to admit. Verity smiled at Zinnia whenever they met. It was a flawless smile, warm enough for society, cold enough for Zinnia to feel the distance beneath it. Verity had spent years trying to gain entrance into rooms where Zinnia arrived by birth, manners, and reputation. That did not mean Zinnia had never struggled. It did not mean Zinnia's life was simple. But to Verity, none of that mattered. She saw the result, not the weight. Zinnia had the Belmont name. Zinnia had Orson's protection. Zinnia had board invitations, foundation influence, public respect, and a husband whose power looked even stronger beside her grace. Verity wanted all of it, not the charity work, not the responsibility, not the pressure of being watched by people who expected perfection. She wanted the seat. She wanted the recognition. She wanted to be the woman others lowered their voices around, the woman whose presence changed the room, the woman men praised carefully because her name carried consequence. To Verity, Zinnia looked like a door that had opened without effort. That belief poisoned her. At a donor preview one evening, Verity watched Zinnia speak with a group of community organizers. Zinnia listened with serious attention, one hand resting lightly around a cup of tea, her face open and calm. No performance, no hunger, no need to pull attention back to herself. People respected that. Verity hated it. She turned to a woman beside her and said, "Zinnia has mastered the art of appearing humble while being impossible to reach." The woman gave an uncertain laugh. Verity smiled as if she had made a harmless observation. But there was nothing harmless in the way she watched Zinnia. She studied her gowns, her posture, her closeness with Orson, the way Calloway's hand found her back in public. Every gentle moment between husband and wife felt like an insult to Verity. She told herself Zinnia had been handed a throne. She never admitted what truly angered her. Zinnia had something Verity could not copy. She had quiet dignity. And men like Calloway, no matter how flawed, still knew when they were near something rare. Zinnia did not find the problem because she was spying on Calloway. She found it because she paid attention. By this stage, she had become more involved in Belmont Global's foundation-linked development work. Orson wanted her to understand the difference between generosity and governance. He taught her that good intentions meant little if contracts left the wrong people exposed. Zinnia took that lesson seriously. One afternoon, while reviewing notes for the Community Development Branch, she noticed a reference buried in a supporting document tied to Reeve Capital's old expansion structure. It mentioned a delayed financial disclosure connected to a loan facility. Calloway had never fully explained during earlier conversations. At first, she thought she had misunderstood the language. She read it again. The issue was not simple, but the meaning troubled her. Something had been carried forward from the failed expansion in a way that should have been discussed before deeper partnership approvals moved ahead. That evening, she waited until dinner ended. Calloway stood near the sideboard, loosening his tie while checking a message on his phone. Zinnia sat at the table with the document beside her plate. "Calloway," she said, "I need to ask you about something." He glanced up. "Now?" "Yes, now." Her tone made him put the phone down. She turned the document toward him and tapped the page. "Why was this disclosure delayed?" His eyes moved over the line once, only once. That told Zinnia he knew exactly what it was. "It is old debt structure," he said. "Nothing that changes the partnership." "That is not what I asked." His jaw tightened. Zinnia kept her voice steady. "If it does not change the partnership, why was it not discussed with my father before the latest approval draft?" Calloway stepped back from the table. "It is technical. You are reading one piece without the full context." Zinnia looked at him carefully. That answer felt like a door closing. "I am asking for the context." He did not give it. For the first time in their marriage, Zinnia saw the business wall come down between them, not the tired wall he carried after meetings, a different one, defensive, cold, built to keep her out. Calloway hated the way Zinnia looked at him across that dinner table, not because her face was harsh, because it was clear. She was not attacking him, she was asking for truth. That made the moment harder to escape. If she had shouted, he might have turned the argument into a problem of emotion. If she had cried, he might have comforted her while giving only half an answer. But Zinnia sat with calm eyes and a document between them, asking a question that deserved honesty. Calloway felt exposed. The delayed disclosure was not the full crisis, but it pointed toward the weakness he had worked so hard to control. If Zinnia pressed further, she would learn how badly Reeve Capital needed the Belmont partnership. She would see that his interest in her father's approval had never been clean. Worse, she might understand what that meant about their marriage, so he reached for anger. "You do not understand how hard men work to protect what they build," he said. The sentence left his mouth sharper than he intended. Zinnia's eyes changed, but she did not lower them. "I understand secrets," she said. "I grew up around them. They always cost more than truth." Calloway looked away. Those words landed where he was weakest. He wanted to tell her she was wrong. He wanted to say business required silence, timing, and judgment. He wanted to remind her that good outcomes sometimes came from difficult choices. But beneath every defense stood the same fact. He had hidden the pressure. He had hidden the motive. He had let her trust grow around a truth he still refused to name. Zinnia stood slowly. "If you need time to explain this well, take it. But do not treat me like I asked a childish question." That should have humbled him. Instead, it frightened him, because she had spoken like a partner, not a decoration. Calloway left the room before he lost control of the answer. He told himself he needed air. What he needed was courage. But courage would have led him back to Zinnia. Pride led him somewhere else. Calloway did not plan to call Verity. That was what he told himself later. But before he reached his car, his phone was already in his hand. Her name sat in his messages from 2 days earlier, beneath a note he had ignored. "Still letting everyone think you need saving?" At the time, he had not answered. Now, wounded by Zinnia's clarity and trapped by his own guilt, he typed back. "Where are you?" Verity replied within a minute. "Private room at Marlowe. Come if you want honest company." Honest. The word should have warned him. Marlowe was a members-only club where the lighting was soft, the music stayed low, and wealthy people went when they wanted privacy without emptiness. Verity was waiting in a corner room with a glass of wine and a smile that said she had expected him. "You look like someone questioned the king," she said. Calloway removed his coat and sat across from her. "I'm not in the mood." "For truth?" Verity asked. "For games?" She leaned back. "Then let me be plain. Zinnia made you feel guilty for doing what every powerful man does, protecting his own." Calloway's eyes lifted. Verity saw the opening and moved closer to it. "She grew up protected by money other people built. Of course she speaks about truth like it costs nothing. You built your company under pressure. You know what the world does to men who admit weakness." It was exactly the wrong thing. That was why it worked. Zinnia had asked him to become honest. Verity invited him to feel misunderstood. Zinnia had placed responsibility in front of him. Verity removed it from the table. She praised the parts of him Zinnia had challenged, his control, his ambition, his refusal to bend. She made his fear sound like strength and his secrecy sound like leadership. Calloway knew she was flattering him. He knew her care was shallow. He knew sitting there was a betrayal before anything else happened. Still, the relief felt easy. That was the danger. Some people do not tempt you with love. They tempt you with escape. And that night, Calloway chose escape over the truth waiting for him at home. At home, Calloway still knew how to look like the man Zinnia had married. He came downstairs in the morning and kissed her forehead before reaching for his coffee. He asked about her foundation meetings. He listened when she spoke about the housing project, even when his mind carried problems he did not share. Some evenings he returned late with tired eyes and a careful smile. Zinnia would look up from her book, searching his face for the truth. He would sit beside her, take her hand, and give her enough tenderness to quiet the questions rising in her heart. That was the cruel part. He did not become cold all at once. He still remembered her tea. He still noticed when she forgot to eat. He still stood beside her at events with one hand resting near her back, as if he belonged there. Zinnia wanted to believe those small acts meant love was still safe. She told herself every marriage had quiet seasons. She told herself pressure changed people. She did not know Calloway had learned to give warmth with one hand while hiding betrayal with the other. Away from Zinnia, Calloway became someone else. Verity called it hours when a wife should have been the only woman with access to his attention. Sometimes he ignored the first call. Sometimes he stared at the screen as if silence would make him honorable. But he answered often enough. Verity knew how to pull him back into pride. She spoke as if Zinnia's kindness were a weakness. She called her sheltered. She said Zinnia had never known what real pressure felt like. She said soft women loved judging men who carried empires on their shoulders. Calloway should have stopped her. He should have defended his wife. He should have said Zinnia's softness had more strength than Verity's polished cruelty. But he let the words pass. Sometimes he even gave a tired laugh, not because he believed every insult, but because Verity made him feel less guilty for hiding. Each call made the distance at home harder to repair. Each secret message placed another wall between him and the woman, waiting with honest questions. Verity did not give him peace, she gave him escape, and Calloway kept choosing it. Zinnia did not need proof to know something had shifted. Love notices what pride tries to hide. She noticed his phone first. Calloway had once left it beside her without thought. Now, he turned it face down during dinner. He carried it into rooms where he used to leave it behind. If a message arrived, his eyes moved too quickly before his hand covered the screen. She noticed his answers next. When she asked about his day, he gave clean summaries instead of real conversation. When she asked if something worried him, he said it was business. When she reached for details, he changed the subject with polished ease. The worst part was his eyes. Calloway could control his voice. He could control his hands. He could control the calm mask the world admired. But guilt moved through his eyes before his mouth found an excuse. Zinnia saw it during breakfast. She saw it across boardroom tables. She saw it when he touched her cheek with tenderness, yet looked away too fast. Her heart knew something her mind kept trying to soften. The man beside her was still present, but not fully hers. Zinnia tried to give Calloway grace. That was how she had learned to love, not blindly, not foolishly, but with patience, with room for human weakness, with the belief that honest people sometimes needed time to speak. She knew Calloway carried pressure. She knew his company demanded more than he admitted. She knew his mother had shaped him into a man who thought pain should be hidden until it became power. So when he withdrew, Zinnia did not attack. She waited. When his replies became short, she chose gentleness first. When he came home late, she left food warm instead of starting a fight. When his phone became a wall between them, she told herself fear made people private. But grace has a limit. Love can give space, but it should not become a hiding place for another person's lies. Zinnia did not understand that yet. She still believed patience could lead him back to her. She still believed the man who once cried quietly in her arms was fighting his way toward truth. She did not know he was walking in the opposite direction. The donor dinner became the final performance before everything broke. The Reeve Foundation building glowed with wealth, music, soft laughter, and expensive confidence. Guests praised the flowers, the food, the speeches, and the couple at the center of the night. Calloway stood before them in a dark suit, calm as ever. Zinnia sat near the front in her deep blue gown, watching him with hope she was almost afraid to feel. She had planned to speak to him later about taking a stronger role in Belmont Global's community work. She wanted them to build something honest together. Calloway began his speech with business. He spoke about legacy, responsibility, and the duty of powerful people to protect those with less. The room listened closely. Then he looked at Zinnia. "My wife taught me that wealth means nothing unless it protects people," he said. Applause filled the room. Zinnia's eyes warmed. For one beautiful moment, she believed the distance between them had been fear, not betrayal. She believed he had finally understood her heart. She did not know those public words would soon turn into private ruin. Hours later, the music was gone. The guests had left with full hearts and polished smiles. Staff had cleared the glasses. The building had settled into silence. Zinnia returned to the private lounge for her forgotten clutch. She was still carrying the warmth of Calloway's speech when she reached the door. That warmth died when she heard Verity's voice. "Do you love her?" Zinnia stopped. For 1 second, she waited for the answer that would save every memory she had protected. She waited for Calloway to defend their marriage, to speak her name with care, to prove that the distance between them had not stolen the truth. But Calloway did not pause long enough. "No," he said. "I married her for her father's money." The words hit Zinnia with quiet force. Every dinner, every kiss on her forehead, every late-night confession, every gentle look across crowded rooms, all of it cracked under one sentence. Too much grace had become a cage. She had kept giving him room to be honest. He had used that room to hide. And now, standing outside the door, Zinnia finally understood the cost of loving a man who wanted her comfort, but not her truth. Zinnia stepped into the lounge slowly. Her heart was shaking, but her feet moved with control. The room still smelled of expensive perfume, wine, and fading celebration. Only minutes ago, this place had belonged to applause. Now, it held the truth her husband had hidden inside their marriage. Calloway stood near the balcony, his glass forgotten beside him. Verity stood close enough to make the betrayal look even uglier. Neither of them spoke at first. Zinnia looked at Calloway, not Verity. She wanted him to see the damage before he reached for excuses. "Say it again," she said. Calloway's face tightened. "Zinnia." "No," she said, her voice calm enough to make him fear it. "Do not say my name like it still belongs safely in your mouth. Say what you just said. Say it while looking at me." He stared at her, trapped between guilt and pride. Zinnia took one more step forward. "You were brave enough to say it when you thought I was not here," she said. "So be brave enough to say it now." Calloway opened his mouth, but no answer came. His silence told her enough. Calloway took a step toward her. "Please," he said. "You heard one part of a conversation." Zinnia gave a small, broken smile. "One part?" she asked. "You said you married me for my father's money. What other part should make that beautiful?" His eyes flashed with panic. It was not that simple. It was simple enough when Verity asked if you loved me. Calloway looked down for a second, and that single movement hurt Zinnia more than any denial. He could not even defend the words with a straight face. "I was angry," he said. "I was under pressure. I said something cruel because I felt cornered." Zinnia shook her head. "No. You said something honest because you felt safe." That stopped him. The truth sat between them, sharp and clean. "You do not get to dress betrayal in better language because I heard it," she continued. "You do not get to take the sentence back and hand me a softer version." Calloway's voice lowered. "I never meant to hurt you. But you meant to use me." He looked at her then. Zinnia held his gaze. "That is the part you keep trying not to say." Verity shifted beside Calloway, no longer smiling. For the first time that night, she looked uncertain, not ashamed, just unsure of her place in a confrontation that belonged to a wife she had underestimated. "Zinnia," Verity began, "you should know this is more complicated than it sounds." Zinnia turned her head slowly. The look she gave Verity carried no shouting, no insult, no need to prove power. That made it stronger. "You do not speak to me tonight," Zinnia said. Verity's mouth tightened. "I was only trying to explain." "No," Zinnia replied. "You were standing close to my husband in a private room, listening while he reduced my life to a transaction. You have taken enough from my home tonight. Do not take my words too." The room went silent again. Calloway closed his eyes for one brief second, as if the shame had finally touched bone. Verity looked away first. That mattered. Zinnia did not raise her voice because she did not need to. She had spent years being mistaken for fragile by women who thought cruelty made them strong. Now, Verity saw the truth. Zinnia's softness had never been weakness, it had been restraint. Zinnia looked down at her left hand. The ring caught the light, beautiful and cruel. Calloway had placed it there in her mother's garden, beneath white roses, while promising honor in front of everyone she loved. She remembered how his hands had felt that day, steady, warm, careful. Now, the ring felt heavier than metal should ever feel. Calloway saw where her eyes had gone. "Zinnia," he said, softer this time, "please do not do that." She looked up. "Do what?" "Make a decision while you are hurt." Her breath caught, not from weakness, but from disbelief. You made decisions while I was trusting you, she said. Do not ask me to pause because pain has finally reached the person who caused it. Her fingers moved to the ring. Calloway's face shifted. He looked afraid now. Zinnia slid the ring off slowly. She did not throw it. She did not slam it against the floor. She walked to the table and placed it there with care. That quiet sound carried more force than anger. This deserved better than being used as decoration, she said. Calloway stared at the ring as if it had become proof against him. Zinnia stepped back from it, and from him. Zinnia faced Calloway fully. For a moment she saw every version of him at once. The man from Boston who listened so carefully, the groom under the roses, the husband who brought her tea, the speaker who praised her before donors, the stranger who told another woman he had married her for money. I gave you my name, she said. Calloway's jaw tightened. I gave you my father's trust. Do you know how rare that is? He does not open doors for men easily, but he opened one for you because I believed in you. Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes shone. I gave you my home, my loyalty, my patience. I defended your silence because I thought pain had made you careful. I thought love needed room. Calloway looked wounded, but Zinnia did not stop. You looked at all of that and saw a deal. He flinched. Zinnia, no. Yes, she said. That is what you said when you thought only Verity could hear you. You saw my heart and calculated its value through my father's money. She pressed a hand against her chest. I loved you as a man. You approached me as an opportunity. That sentence broke something in his face. Calloway had feared many losses in his life. He had feared investors walking away. He had feared banks questioning him. He had feared rivals seeing weakness. He had feared his mother's disappointment more than he ever admitted. But standing in that lounge, watching Zinnia step away from the ring, he felt a different fear. It was not about Belmont Global. It was not about the expansion shares. It was not about reputation, headlines, or money. It was Zinnia, the woman whose trust had once made his house feel peaceful, the woman who had seen pain in him without using it against him, the woman who had loved him before he knew how to deserve it. Now she looked at him as though she had finally met the man beneath every polished word, and she did not like what she saw. Calloway's voice cracked slightly. I can explain everything. Zinnia's face stayed calm. You already did. She turned toward the door. He reached out but stopped before touching her. For once he understood he had no right. Before she walked away, she looked back. Calloway, the worst part is not that you needed money. The worst part is that you let me believe I was loved while you were counting what my love could buy. Would you ever hear Calloway out after this kind of betrayal, or should Zinnia walk away forever? Comment your answer. By sunrise, Zinnia returned to the Belmont estate. She was still wearing the deep blue gown from the donor dinner. The same gown Calloway once said made her look calm and strong. Now it felt heavy against her skin, as if the night had followed her home and settled into the fabric. She did not go inside at first. She walked past the front entrance, past the quiet windows, past the staff who froze when they saw her face. She went straight to her mother's rose garden. The white roses stood open in the morning light. Her mother had planted them years ago, back when Zinnia was young enough to believe love always meant safety. The garden had been her peaceful place after grief, after public pressure, after long nights when the Belmont name felt too large to carry. This time, peace did not come quickly. Zinnia sat on the stone bench and finally let herself fall apart. No cameras, no guests, no perfect posture, only a wife who had heard her husband call their marriage a transaction. She pressed both hands over her mouth to hold back the sound, but the pain still came. Because heartbreak hurts most when it rewrites every memory you once trusted. Orson found her in the garden, before the house fully woke. He came slowly, not with the force of a powerful man, but with the worry of a father who already knew something had broken. One look at Zinnia's face told him more than any headline ever would. He sat beside her without rushing the truth out of her. That was one of Orson's quiet gifts. He knew when a question would help, and he knew when silence needed to sit first. Zinnia stared at the roses for a long time before she spoke. He said he married me for your money. Orson closed his eyes. For a moment, He looked older than she had ever seen him, not weak, wounded. As if Calloway had betrayed him too, but the wound that mattered most was the one in his daughter's voice. "I warned him," Orson said. Zinnia's lips trembled. "You warned him for business. I wish someone had warned me for love." Orson reached for her hand. "I should have protected you better." Zinnia shook her head. "No, I chose him." "That does not make his betrayal your fault," Orson said. Those words reached her. For the first time since the lounge, Zinnia breathed without blaming herself. By noon, Zinnia made her first clear decision. She would not return to Calloway's house, not for clothes, not for answers, not for one more conversation that allowed him to soften what she had heard with her own ears. Orson sent trusted staff to collect what she needed. Zinnia wrote a short list with steady hands, though her heart shook with every item. Dresses, books, her mother's framed note from the library. The small tea set, Calloway once joked, looked too delicate for everyday life. She paused over that one. Then she crossed it off. Some things belonged to the old marriage. While Zinnia reclaimed her space, Orson acted as the head of Belmont Global. He froze the pending expansion shares at once. No signature, no final approval, no quiet favors for a son-in-law who had treated trust like a business tool. By evening, Belmont Global paused all joint approvals with Reeve Capital. The language stayed formal. The message did not. Calloway Reeve no longer had open access to Belmont Power. Executives whispered, investors noticed, reporters began calling, but Zinnia did not hide behind her father's decision. She asked to review every document herself. Her marriage had broken, her judgment had not. Calloway began calling before the first official notice reached his office. Zinnia watched his name appear on her phone once, twice, 5 times. She did not answer. Each call felt like a hand reaching from the life she had just left. Part of her wanted to hear his voice. That part hurt her pride. But it was real. Love does not vanish at the exact moment trust breaks. It lingers, confused and wounded, searching for the person it used to know. But Zinnia had heard enough for one night. Calloway sent messages next. "Please let me explain. You do not know the whole truth. I need to see you." Zinnia read none of them fully. She placed the phone face down and walked away. By the 3rd day, Calloway came to the Belmont estate gate. Orson refused him entry. Calloway stood outside the iron gates in a dark coat, looking less like the man magazines admired and more like a man who had lost the right to enter the only home where he had been loved without performance. Zinnia watched from an upstairs window. She did not go down. Not because she felt nothing, because she felt too much. And this time, feeling would not lead her back into harm. 3 days later, Zinnia walked into the Belmont Global boardroom alone. The room went still. Some executives had known her since childhood. They remembered her sitting beside Orson at holiday events, quiet and polite, wearing pearls and listening more than she spoke. To them, she was still the founder's graceful daughter, kind, well-mannered, protected. Zinnia let them believe that for one more minute. She took her seat, placed a folder on the table, and opened it. "My marriage is private," she said. "This company's future is not." No one moved. She continued, voice firm. "Any partnership built on hidden pressure deserves review. Any contract tied to personal manipulation deserves daylight." The legal director glanced at Orson, but Orson did not speak for her. Zinnia turned the first page. She presented delayed disclosures tied to Calloway's old expansion loan. She listed weak oversight points in the Reeve Capital proposal. She identified areas where investor pressure might threaten community obligations. She raised staff concerns that had been dismissed because the Reeve name carried too much influence. Her voice did not break. Her facts did not bend. She had not collected those notes for revenge. She had kept them because good work needs clean foundations. Now those notes became her first act of leadership. At first, the executives listened with surprise. After 10 minutes, they listened with attention. After 20, they listened with respect. Zinnia did not speak like a wounded wife trying to punish her husband. She spoke like someone who understood the danger of mixing personal trust with corporate silence. She did not ask the board to destroy Calloway. She asked them to protect the company from any agreement that had not been built with full honesty. That difference mattered. She pointed to one clause and explained how it gave Reeve Capital too much room to delay community protections if investor confidence dropped. She highlighted another section that placed Belmont land at risk if Reeve's old debt pressures worsened. The chief financial officer leaned forward. The legal director began taking notes. One senior executive who had barely looked at her when she entered now asked for her opinion on oversight structure. Zinnia answered without hesitation. Orson sat at the far end of the table, silent, but his face carried pride. He had entered that room ready to protect his daughter. Instead, he watched his daughter protect the company. When the meeting ended, no one spoke to Zinnia like a fragile woman in need of pity. They stood when she stood. That was the moment the room changed. Zinnia Belmont had entered as Orson's daughter. She left as a leader. A broken heart does not end a woman's strength. Verity expected Calloway to come to her after Zinnia left. She thought shame would push him toward the woman who already knew his worst words. She thought his pride would need comfort. She thought Zinnia's silence would make him angry enough to choose the easier room. But Calloway arrived with a face Verity had never seen on him before. No charm, no hunger for praise, no desire to be excused. "This ends now," he said. Verity laughed softly. "You're ending this because your wife heard the truth?" Calloway's eyes stayed tired. "No, I'm ending this because I finally heard myself." Her smile faded. "She will never take you back," Verity said. Calloway looked away for a moment, and that small movement carried more pain than anger ever would. "She should not," he said. "Not because I say I'm sorry, not because I feel guilty, not because I lost control for one night. She should not hear me until I become someone worth hearing." Verity stared at him, shocked that her praise no longer held him. For once, Calloway did not choose escape. He chose the first painful step toward truth. Iona Reeve did not respond to scandal with sorrow. She responded with strategy. She arrived at Calloway's office the next morning, dressed as though reputation were a courtroom, and she had already chosen the defense. "You need to move first," she said. "Make Zinnia look emotional. People believe wounded wives lose judgment. Use that." Calloway looked at his mother across the desk. For years, that voice had shaped him. Win, control, protect the name. Turn pain into advantage before someone turns it against you. But this time, her words sounded empty. "She is not the problem," Calloway said. Iona's eyes narrowed. "Do not become sentimental now." "I became what you taught me to become," he said. "That is the problem." The room went cold. Iona told him he would lose investors, he would lose influence, he would lose the Belmont deal. Calloway stood and faced the window. "I already lost the only person who loved me without requiring a performance." That day, he released a public statement. He accepted responsibility for undisclosed conflicts in the Belmont partnership. He did not blame Zinnia. He did not use marriage as a shield. It cost him money. It gave him the first honest piece of himself back. Zinnia did not heal by pretending she felt nothing. She healed by choosing work that still mattered. The housing project became her anchor. Each morning she reviewed plans, met with architects, listened to nonprofit leaders, and asked questions about families who would one day sleep safely under those roofs. Her heart still hurt. Some nights she missed Calloway in quiet ways, the empty chair across from her, the sound of his steps in the hall, the old habit of turning to tell him something before remembering he no longer lived beside her. She hated those moments. She hated that love did not obey betrayal. But pain did not stop her. At project meetings, Zinnia became sharper. She asked for stronger tenant protections. She demanded clearer budgets. She pushed back when donors wanted their names larger than the family's needs. People began to see her differently, not as a wife recovering from public shame, not as Orson Belmont's daughter, as a woman turning heartbreak into purpose. The housing center reminded her that her heart still had use. Calloway had broken trust. He had not broken her gift for building safe places. One afternoon, a package arrived at the Belmont estate. No diamonds, no flowers, no grand apology meant to pressure her heart, only a leather journal. Zinnia almost sent it back. Instead, she opened the first page and saw Calloway's handwriting. "I am writing the truth because I spent too long speaking in pieces." Her fingers tightened around the cover. Page by page, Calloway confessed everything. The pressure on Reeve Capital, the failed expansion, Iona's advice, his first decision to move closer to Zinnia because Belmont Global held what his company needed. He wrote about Boston, the museum walks, the first time her kindness made his plan feel shameful, the wedding day, the vows that made guilt rise in his throat, the nights he wanted to confess but chose fear instead. He wrote about Verity, not as temptation, but as cowardice. At the end, he wrote the line that made Zinnia close her eyes. "I married you for money. Then you became the first person I loved without knowing how to deserve it." Zinnia cried, not because the journal fixed anything, because the truth finally matched the wound. Months later, Zinnia arrived at the housing site before a planning review. Workers moved across the unfinished building. Concrete dust covered the floor. Wooden frames marked the future apartments where families would one day begin again. Near the supply truck, she saw Calloway. He wore rolled sleeves and carried boxes with the volunteers. No cameras followed him. No donor plaque carried his name. No one treated him like a billionaire. Zinnia stopped walking. Calloway saw her and lowered the box in his hands. "I did not know you would be here," he said. "This is my project," she replied. "I know. I donated through the public fund. No name attached." Zinnia looked at him for a long moment. "You think carrying supplies makes you changed?" "No," he said. "I think change starts when no one claps." That answer unsettled her because it sounded true. Over the following weeks, they crossed paths often. He kept distance. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not corner her with speeches. He worked, he listened, he left. The old Calloway entered rooms to be admired. This man stayed after meetings to stack chairs. Zinnia noticed, but she did not mistake effort for repair. 1 year later, the Belmont Housing Center opened in Newark. Families entered safe apartments with clean walls, working locks, bright windows, and hoped they did not have to borrow from anyone rich to feel worthy of it. Zinnia stood on the stage and spoke about dignity. Calloway stood at the back. No title, no reserved seat, no spotlight. After the ceremony, Zinnia found him near the garden wall. "You came," she said. "I wanted to see what you built." "What we started," she said, then paused. "What I finished." Calloway nodded. "Yes, what you finished." Zinnia looked at him with calm eyes. "I signed the divorce papers this morning." Pain crossed his face, but he did not fight her. "I will sign mine," he said. She expected begging, promises, bargains. He gave none. "Do you love me now?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Then let me go with respect." His eyes shone. "I will." Zinnia's voice softened. "I forgive you, Calloway, but forgiveness is not the same as returning." 2 years later, Zinnia opened a leadership institute in her mother's name. She taught young women how to read contracts, rooms, and intentions. Calloway rebuilt Reeve Capital with transparency and accepted the cost of his choices. One winter evening, Zinnia read his final letter. He wrote that love meant becoming safe for the person you wanted. This time, Zinnia did not cry. She smiled because she no longer needed his love to feel whole. Love without respect is not enough. Forgiveness does not always mean returning. Never build love on hidden motives. Never treat a loyal heart like a business deal. Never mistake gentleness for weakness. Money builds houses, but truth builds homes. A ring means little when respect is missing. The right person will never make. You feel like the price they paid for your love was too high. Was Zinnia right to forgive Calloway but still leave? Comment your answer and share the biggest lesson you learned from this story. Like, share, and subscribe to Love Tales with Mr. Easton.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for choosing stories that ask more of you. The next story will be waiting.